My name is Tiana, and at 29 years old, I ruin financial criminals for a living. Usually, those criminals are corporate executives hiding millions in offshore accounts. Last night, the criminals were my own parents. They sat there in one of Atlanta's most exclusive restaurants, surrounded by empty wine bottles and half-eaten plates of lobster, smiling as they slid a $5,600 bill across the table. "Oh, you missed dinner, honey," my mother said, wiping her mouth with a linen napkin. "But you can still catch the check." My sister laughed, recording me on her phone, while my husband of a brother-in-law smirked. They thought I was the same pushover I was 10 years ago. They had no idea I had already flagged the transaction as fraud. Before I tell you how I sent my entire family to rock bottom in less than 20 minutes, let me know where you are watching from in the comments. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to teach a toxic family a lesson they will never forget. The Gilded Lily is the kind of restaurant where the air conditioning smells like white tea and the lighting is designed to make jewelry sparkle. I walked in wearing my work clothes, a charcoal gray blazer, and sensible flats, feeling the weight of a 12-hour shift as a forensic accountant pressing down on my shoulders. The hostess looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my lack of designer labels before reluctantly leading me through the dining room. I kept my head high, ignoring the soft clinking of crystal and the hushed conversations of the city's elite. I knew this world better than they did. I knew which of them were actually wealthy and which were leveraging their second mortgage to pay for the appetizers. I spotted my family at the best table in the house near the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. They looked like a picture-perfect advertisement for Black excellence. If you did not know that everything they were wearing was either counterfeit or purchased on a credit card that was 2 months past due. My mother Bernice was wearing a sequined gown that was far too formal for a Tuesday dinner, loud gold jewelry clanking on her wrists. My father Clarence was puffing out his chest in a suit that looked expensive from a distance, but showed the strain of cheap fabric at the seams. And there was Ebony, my younger sister, glowing with the kind of confidence that only comes from never having paid a bill in your life, next to her husband Brad, who had the relaxed posture of a man who firmly believed the world owed him a living. I stopped at the edge of the table. The feast was clearly over. The white tablecloth was stained with red wine and sauce. Platters that had held Wagyu beef and truffle risotto were scraped clean. 3 empty bottles of vintage Cabernet stood like sentinels in the center of the wreckage. "Oh, look who finally decided to show up," my mother said, her voice carrying just loud enough for the neighboring tables to hear. She did not stand up to hug me. She did not ask how my day was. She just tapped a manicured fingernail against the base of her wine glass. "You are late, Tiana." We waited as long as we could, but we were starving. I looked at the empty chairs. There was no place setting for me, no menu, just the debris of their indulgence. "Happy anniversary, Mom and Dad," I said, my voice flat. "I see you started without me." Ebony giggled, holding her phone up to capture my reaction. "Started and finished," she chirped. "The food was amazing, Tiana, you really missed out. But do not worry, Brad had them wrap up the breadbasket for you." Brad leaned back in his chair, swirling the last dregs of wine in his glass. His eyes scanned me with that familiar mix of pity and amusement. "You look tired, Tiana, working too hard as usual. You should learn to enjoy the finer things in life like your sister. Ebony knows how to live." I ignored him and looked at my father. "You invited me for 8 o'clock, Dad." I checked my watch. "It is 8:15. You are done eating." My father waved a dismissive hand. "Traffic was light, so we came early." "Do not make a face. Tiana, it gives you wrinkles. Besides, you are here now, and that is what matters." My mother picked up the black leather folder containing the bill and slid it across the table toward me. It moved smoothly over the white linen, stopping right at my fingertips. "Since you missed the meal, it is only fair you handle the contribution," she said, smiling that tight smile that never reached her eyes. "Consider it your anniversary gift to us. We raised you after all. It is the least you can do." I opened the folder. The total stared up at me. $5,640. I scanned the itemized list. They had not just eaten dinner, they had gorged themselves. Appetizers meant for 4 people ordered for 1, the most expensive steaks on the menu. And then I saw it at the bottom of the list. 2 bottles of Screaming Eagle Cabernet priced at $800 each marked to go. I looked up at Brad. He winked. Thought we would take a nightcap home, he said smoothly, to toast the happy couple properly. I felt a cold clarity wash over me. This was not a dinner. This was a robbery. They had never intended for me to eat. They had summoned me here for one purpose only to function as a human credit card. I closed the folder and placed my hand on top of it. My mother was watching me closely, her eyes glittering with challenge. Ebony had moved her phone closer, waiting for the moment I would crumble and pull out my wallet just like I always did. Interesting, I said, keeping my voice low and steady. The invitation you texted me, Mom said 8 o'clock. But this receipt shows the table was seated at 6:30. You ate a 3-course meal in peace and only called me when it was time to pay. Brad sighed loudly, a sound of exaggerated patience. Tiana, do not start with the accounting nonsense. I know you work with boring numbers all day, but this is family. In our culture we share. We lift each other up. Do not embarrass us by being stingy in a place like this. It makes us all look bad. The microaggression hit its mark, but I did not flinch. I looked Brad dead in the eye. In our culture we honor our parents, I said. We do not use them as an excuse to steal bottles of wine we cannot afford. And as for making us look bad, I think you are doing a fine job of that all on your own, Brad. Ebony gasped, dropping her phone slightly. How dare you speak to my husband like that? He is a real estate mogul. He understands assets better than you ever will. He is a part-time agent who has not sold a house in 6 months, I corrected. And this bill isn't an asset, Ebony. It is a liability. One I am not paying. My father slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. Enough, Tiana. You are ruining the night. You make more money than everyone at this table combined. What is $5,000 to you? You have become cold. You have forgotten where you came from. Now pay the bills so the valet can bring the car around. I looked at my father. I saw the sweat beading on his forehead. I saw the way my mother was clutching her purse too tightly. They were not just arrogant. They were desperate. I am not paying, I said clearly. My mother let out a sharp laugh. Do not be ridiculous. Of course you are paying. We certainly aren't. And then she said the thing that sealed their fate. Besides, we already tried to run it. The table went silent. My mother covered her mouth, realizing her slip, but it was too late. My forensic brain latched onto the sentence. You tried to run it, I repeated. Run what? Brad tried to intervene, reaching for the bill folder. It is nothing, Tiana, just a technical glitch with the machine. Just give them your card and let us go. I snatched the folder before he could touch it. I pulled out the receipt again and looked closer. Tucked behind the main bill was a smaller slip of paper. It was a transaction rejection notice. Card ending in 8890 declined. My blood ran cold. That was the number of an American Express card I had reported lost 3 years ago. A supplementary card I had given my mother for emergencies, only when I was first starting out and still naive enough to trust them. I had canceled it after she bought a designer handbag and claimed it was groceries. You still have that card? I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that was more terrifying than a scream. You kept the card I told you to destroy 3 years ago. And you tried to use it tonight. My mother shrugged, attempting to regain her composure. I found it in an old wallet. I thought it might still work. I figured you would not mind since it was for our anniversary. Why are you making such a big deal out of it? It did not go through anyway. That is why we called you. So you tried to steal from me first, I said slowly, piecing it together. And when the theft failed, you called me down here to rob me to my face. It is not stealing if we are family. My father grunted. Your money is family money. I stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. I signaled to the manager who had been hovering nearby, watching the tension at our table with a practiced eye. He walked over immediately, relief washing over his face at the prospect of the bill finally being settled. "Is there a problem, ma'am?" the manager asked. "Yes," I said. I pulled the rejected transaction slip from the folder and held it up. "My name is Tiana Williams. This attempted charge was made with a card issued in my name." My mother let out a sigh of relief. "See, she is handling it. Just run her new card and we will be on our way. Wrap up the dessert, too." I turned to my mother and smiled. It was a smile I had learned from observing sharks in the corporate world. "I am handling it, Mom." I turned back to the manager. "I did not authorize this transaction. This card was reported stolen 3 years ago. The people at this table attempted to use it fraudulently, and now they are attempting to extort me to pay for a meal I did not eat." The manager's polite expression vanished. He looked at the bill, then at my parents. "Is this true?" he asked, his voice chilly. Ebony jumped up, dropping her phone. "She is lying. She is just jealous because we didn't wait for her. She is crazy." Brad stood up too, putting a hand on the manager's shoulder, a move that was instantly regretted as a security guard stepped forward. "Look, man, it is just a family dispute. My sister-in-law is having a bad day. Here, run my card." Brad pulled out a credit card with a dramatic flourish. I watched with amusement. I knew Brad's credit score better than he did. The manager took the card and walked to the portable terminal. He inserted it. We all waited. The machine beeped a long, harsh sound. "Declined," the manager said loud and clear. "Try it again," Brad said, sweat starting to stain the collar of his dress shirt. "It is a platinum card. It has a $50,000 limit." "It is declined, sir," the manager said, handing it back. "Do you have another form of payment?" My father patted his pockets, pretending to look for a wallet I knew was empty. "This is an outrage. Do you know who I am? I am Clarence Williams. I am a pillar of this community." I stepped back, creating distance between myself and the sinking ship. "I am afraid I cannot help you, gentlemen," I said to the manager. "I have my own dinner to get to. I suggest you call the police if they cannot pay." Attempted credit card fraud is a felony in Georgia, especially when the amount exceeds $500. My mother grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my blazer. "Tiana, you cannot leave us here. They will arrest us." I looked down at her hand until she let go. "You should have thought about that before you ordered the Screaming Eagle, Mom. Happy anniversary." I turned and walked toward the exit. Behind me, chaos erupted. I heard Ebony screaming that this was harassment. I heard Brad trying to offer his fake Rolex as collateral. I heard my father bellowing about suing the restaurant. And I heard my mother screaming my name, a sound that used to make me freeze in terror, but tonight just sounded like noise. I walked out into the cool Atlanta night air. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a notification from my bank app. Another attempted charge on the old card. They were trying to run the numbers manually now, desperate to find a loophole. I declined the charge with a tap of my thumb. I got into my car and sat there for a moment watching the entrance of the restaurant. A few minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up, lights flashing silently. 2 officers walked inside. I did not stay to watch them be escorted out. I had work to do, because I knew this was not the end. My family was like a hydra. Cut off one head and 2 more would grow back uglier and more desperate than before. They would not take this humiliation lying down. They would come for me. They would come for my reputation, my job, and my sanity. But they had made a critical error. They thought they were dealing with the daughter who just wanted to be loved. They did not realize they were now dealing with a forensic accountant who knew exactly where the bodies were buried because she was the one who had been paying for the shovel. I started the engine and pulled away. The real war had just begun. I woke up at 5:30 in the morning, not to the gentle chime of my alarm, but to the sensation of my phone vibrating itself off the nightstand. It was buzzing so violently against the wood, it sounded like an angry hornet trapped in a jar. I reached for it, my eyes still heavy with sleep, and the moment I tapped the screen, the notifications cascaded down like a digital avalanche. Missed calls, text messages, Instagram tags, Facebook mentions. The sheer volume was enough to crash the app for a split second. I sat up in bed, the cold morning air of my grandmother's house doing nothing to cool the sudden heat rising in my chest. I knew what this was. I did not even have to open the messages to know that the Hydra had grown a new head overnight. I opened Instagram first. There, at the very top of my feed, was a live replay from Ebony's account posted at 2 in the morning. The thumbnail was a close-up of her face streaked with mascara tears, eyes wide and pleading. The caption read simply, "The betrayal of a sister." I pressed play. Ebony's voice came through tinny and distorted, but the performance was Oscar-worthy. She was sitting in the passenger seat of what looked like my father's car, the interior dark except for the passing streetlights. "Hey guys," she whispered, sniffling loudly. "I didn't want to bring this to the timeline, but I just don't know what else to do. We just left the Gilded Lily. It was supposed to be my parents' 30th anniversary. A milestone. And my sister, Tiana, she choked back a fake sob and wiped her nose with the back of her hand, showing off a ring that I knew for a fact was cubic zirconia. She invited us out. She told us to order whatever we wanted. She said it was her treat because she got a big promotion. And then, when the bill came, she just left. She literally walked out and left our elderly parents there with a $5,000 tab. My dad had to give them his watch. My mom is having chest pains right now. I just don't understand how someone can be so successful and so heartless. She makes 6 figures and she left us to rot. Please pray for my family, y'all. We are really going through it." The video ended. It had 40,000 views. I scrolled down to the comments. It was a bloodbath. Strangers who knew nothing about me or my life were dissecting my character with surgical cruelty. One comment read, "Imagine making it out of the hood and forgetting who put you there. Shameful." Another said, "Drop her employer's name. She needs to be held accountable." And another simply, "This is why I don't trust bougie black women. They get a little money and think they are better than their own blood." I felt a wave of nausea. Ebony had weaponized the very culture I cherished against me. She had painted me as the villain in a Tyler Perry movie, the cold corporate sellout who abandoned her roots. She knew exactly which buttons to push. She knew that in our community, honoring your parents was paramount, and she had framed my survival as their humiliation. My text messages were worse. They were from family, not just immediate family, but the extended network of cousins, aunts, and uncles who usually only contacted me when they needed a loan or a job reference. Cousin Marcus, who had borrowed $500 from me 2 years ago and never paid it back, texted, "You wrong for that, Tiana." Auntie Bernice called me crying. "You got all that money and you gonna let them pawn a watch? You need Jesus." Aunt Sheila, who had not spoken to me since I refused to hire her unqualified son, texted, "I always knew you were selfish. Your grandmother is rolling in her grave. Fix this, or do not bother coming to the reunion." I did not reply. I did not defend myself. I did not type out a paragraph explaining that the watch was fake or that they had tried to use my stolen credit card. Engaging with a mob only makes the torches burn brighter. I got out of bed and walked to the kitchen. I made a pot of coffee, my movements mechanical. I needed the caffeine because today was not going to be a day for emotions. Today was a day for forensics. I carried my mug into my home office, the room my mother had always hated because she said it looked too clinical. I sat down in my ergonomic chair and faced my 3 monitors. This was my cockpit. This was where I hunted people who thought they were smarter than the system. My family thought they had won the morning. They thought the public shaming would break me, that I would call them crying, begging for forgiveness, offering to pay off their debts, just to make the comments stop. They thought they were dealing with Tiana the daughter. They were wrong. They were dealing with Tiana the auditor. I cracked my knuckles and woke up the screens. The blue light washed over my face, replacing the morning sun. I was not going to fight them on Instagram. I was going to fight them on the blockchain, in the public records, and in the banking ledgers. I started with my father, Clarence. I pulled up his social security number, which I knew by heart, because I had done his taxes for 5 years straight before I realized he was hiding gambling losses. I ran a comprehensive asset search, the screen populated with red flags. My father was not just broke, he was underwater. He had 3 liens against his name from unpaid contractors. His credit score was in the low 500s. And then I saw something interesting. A recent inquiry from a car title loan company. He had tried to get a loan on his Mercedes, the one he paraded around town like a trophy. Denied. The title was already leveraged. He was driving a car that the bank effectively owned twice over. I moved on to Brad, my brother-in-law, the quote-unquote real estate mogul. I accessed the state licensing board database. I typed in his name. The result came back instantly. License status suspended. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Brad had not been a licensed agent for 6 months. He had failed to pay his renewal fees, and there was a pending complaint against him for commingling escrow funds. He wasn't selling houses. He was playing house. I dug deeper into Brad's financials. I pulled his transaction history using a backdoor tracing software I used for work. It was a mess of crypto exchanges and online sports betting sites. He was bleeding money. Thousands of dollars a week disappearing into the void of Ethereum and DraftKings. And then I saw the transfers. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. Transfers from a joint account held by my parents. $500, $1,000, $2,000. The dates lined up perfectly with the dates my mother had called me complaining about being short on bills. Brad wasn't just broke, he was draining my parents dry, and they were letting him do it because they believed in his get-rich-quick schemes. They believed he was the son they never had, the one who would make them rich without them having to work. But none of this explained the desperation at the restaurant. If they were just broke, they could have eaten at a cheaper place. They could have asked me for a loan privately. The ambush at the Gilded Lily felt different. It felt like a distraction. It felt like they were trying to butter me up or break me down for something bigger. I turned my attention to my mother, Bernice. My mother was the mastermind. My father had the ego, and Brad had the greed, but my mother had the cunning. She was the one who manipulated the chess pieces. I pulled up her credit report. I still had authorized access because I had co-signed a car loan for her 4 years ago, a decision I regretted daily. The report loaded. I scanned the recent inquiries. Credit card application. Denied. Personal loan application. Denied. Payday loan inquiry. Approved. She was drowning. But then my eyes caught the most recent entry dated just 3 days ago. Mortgage inquiry. Lender. Quick Cash. Hard Money LLC. I frowned. My parents didn't own a home. They had sold their house 5 years ago to pay off debts and had been renting a luxury condo downtown ever since to keep up appearances. You cannot take a mortgage out on a rental. So what were they trying to mortgage? I clicked on the inquiry details. The system lagged for a second, then popped up the information. Property address: 124 Oak Street, Atlanta, Georgia. My heart stopped. 124 Oak Street. That was the house I was sitting in. That was my grandmother's house. The house she had left to me, and me, alone in her will, because she knew my parents would sell it for parts. The house I had spent 5 years and nearly $200,000 restoring. The house that was fully paid off. They were trying to take a hard money loan out on my house. I sat back in my chair, my hands trembling slightly, not from fear, but from a cold, white-hot rage. Hard money loans are the loans of last resort. They have astronomical interest rates and predatory terms. They are used by flippers and desperate people. If you default, they take the property immediately. But how? How could they even apply? The deed was in my name. Unless... I started typing furiously, opening a new window for the county clerk's office. I searched for recent filings under my name. There it was. A document filed pending review. Power of attorney. I clicked the PDF. It opened on my screen. It was a document granting Bernice Williams full power of attorney over the assets of Tiana Williams. I stared at the signature at the bottom. It was my signature, or at least a very good copy of it. I zoomed in. The loops on the T were slightly too round. The slant was a degree too sharp. It was the signature I used when I was 18 years old before I developed my professional autograph. And then I remembered. The summer before I left for college, my mother had made me sign a stack of papers. Financial aid forms, she said. Dormitory agreements. Insurance waivers. I had signed them all, blindly trusting her because she was my mother. She had slipped a power of attorney into that stack. An indefinite power of attorney. But that was 10 years ago. In the state of Georgia, a power of attorney doesn't automatically expire unless specified, but most banks and lenders won't accept one older than a few years without re-verification. However, Quick Cash Hard Money LLC wasn't a bank. They were predators. They wouldn't care how old the document was as long as the signature matched, and they could claim plausible deniability. They were going to leverage my home, my sanctuary, to fund Brad's crypto gambling addiction and my father's delusions of grandeur. They were going to strip the equity out of the only thing my grandmother had left me, and when the loan inevitably defaulted, they were going to let the lender kick me out on the street. This was why they invited me to dinner. They weren't just trying to get me to pay for lobster, they were trying to get me in the room to gauge my suspicion. Or maybe they needed me distracted while the loan officer processed the final approval. Maybe they needed to see if I had received any notifications mailed to the house. I looked at the date on the application. It was in the final underwriting stage. They were expecting the funds within 48 hours. That meant the funds would be deposited into my mother's account by Friday. I looked at the clock. It was Wednesday morning. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. The time for tears was over. The time for being the good daughter was dead and buried. I picked up my phone. I ignored the hundreds of hate comments still rolling in on Instagram. I ignored the texts from my cousins calling me a sellout. I dialed the number of the one person in this family who hated my parents almost as much as I did right now. Aunt May. She was my mother's older sister, the black sheep of the family, not because she was bad, but because she was honest. She had cut ties with Bernice 20 years ago after my mother stole her jewelry to pay for a vacation. Aunt May lived in a small apartment 3 blocks away and spent her days smoking menthols and watching court TV. She answered on the first ring. "Tiana?" She rasped, her voice sounding like gravel in a blender. "I just saw that little heifer Ebony on the internet. Is it true? Did the police really drag Clarence out of that fancy restaurant?" "It is true." "Aunt May," I said, my eyes fixed on the fraudulent document on my screen. "But that is just the appetizer." I took a sip of my cold coffee. "They forged my signature, Aunt May. They are trying to mortgage Grandma's house." There was a silence on the other end. Then the sound of a lighter clicking. A long inhale. "Those dirty bastards," May said, exhaling smoke. I told you they would eat their young if they got hungry enough." "I know," I said. "You were right." "So what are we gonna do?" she asked. "You want me to go over there?" "I still got my baseball bat from 1996. "No," I said. "No bats. We are going to do this the right way. The legal way. The way that hurts forever. I need you to come over. I need a witness. And I need you to bring that box of old letters Grandma left with you. The ones she wrote about why she didn't trust Bernice." "I'm putting my shoes on now," May said. I hung up. I looked at the 3 screens glowing in front of me. The evidence of their greed. the proof of their betrayal. They wanted to use me. They wanted to humiliate me online. They wanted to take my home. I opened a new email draft. Recipient: the Fraud Division of the Georgia Bureau of Investigation. Subject: identity theft and real estate fraud involving Bernice and Clarence Williams. I started typing. They wanted a check. I was about to write them one they could never cash. My office in the financial district is my fortress. It is on the 42nd floor, encased in glass and steel, a world away from the chaos of my family. Here the air is filtered and cool. Here the only sounds are the hum of high-speed servers and the polite murmur of corporate strategy. I had arrived early, running on 3 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline. My assistant had strict instructions: no calls from family members, no unexpected visitors. I was deep in the digital trail of Brad's crypto wallets, attempting to trace where exactly my parents' retirement fund had vanished to when the door to my office slammed open. I did not jump. In my line of work, you learn not to flinch. I slowly took my hands off the keyboard and looked up. My father, Clarence, stood in the doorway. He was wearing his best Sunday suit, a cream-colored three-piece that was slightly too tight across the midsection. He was sweating despite the aggressive air conditioning. His eyes were darting around the room, taking in the mahogany desk, the panoramic view of Atlanta, the awards on the wall. It was the look of a man assessing the value of things he did not own. Behind him, my assistant looked terrified, holding a phone and trying to signal security. "It is fine, Sarah," I said calmly, waving her away. "Give us a moment, but keep security on the line." Sarah nodded and closed the door, leaving me alone with the man who had tried to stick me with a $5,000 dinner bill less than 12 hours ago. My father adjusted his tie, trying to regain the composure he had lost the night before. He walked over to the leather chair opposite my desk and sat down without being invited. He placed a thick manila envelope on the glass surface between us. "You look tired, Tiana," he said, his voice booming with that fake joviality he used when he was trying to sell someone a bad idea. "Working too hard as usual. You know what they say, you can't take it with you." I stared at him. I did not offer him coffee. I did not ask how he was. I just waited. Silence is an auditor's best weapon. People hate silence. They fill it with the truth if you wait long enough. My father cleared his throat, shifting uncomfortably. "Look about last night. Your mother and I were talking. We are willing to be the bigger people here. We know you were stressed. Maybe you had a bad day at the office. We forgive you for the scene you caused. It was embarrassing, sure, but family is family. We move on." I almost laughed. The audacity was breathtaking. He was forgiving me for stopping him from robbing me. "I am busy, Dad," I said, my voice ice cold. "State your business." He leaned forward, his eyes gleaming with a manic intensity. "Brad found something, Tiana. Something big. You know how smart Brad is with the markets. He has been tracking a new cryptocurrency launch. It is called Legacy Coin. It is ground floor stuff. Institutional investors only. But Brad has a connection. He can get us in before the public offering." I kept my face blank. Legacy Coin. It sounded like exactly the kind of rug pull scam Brad would fall for. "And let me guess," I said, "you need capital. We need a bridge loan," my father corrected quickly. "Just a temporary injection of liquidity. The returns are guaranteed to be 300% in the first month." Brad did the math. "We are talking about generational wealth, Tiana. The kind of money that commands respect. The kind of money that proves we made it." He pushed the manila envelope toward me. Brad put together the prospectus. "And since you are the financial expert in the family, we wanted to give you the first right of refusal. But we need to move fast. The window closes at noon today." I looked at the envelope. I knew exactly what was inside. It wasn't a prospectus. It was a trap. I reached out and opened the envelope. Inside, there was a single sheet of paper. It wasn't an investment summary. It was a guarantor agreement. A personal guarantee for a business loan of $150,000 taken out in the name of a shell company I recognized from my research earlier that morning. But that wasn't what caught my eye. What caught my eye was the signature line at the bottom. There was a faint smudge near the X where I was supposed to sign. To the untrained eye, it looked like a bit of dirt or a printing error. But I have spent 7 years looking at documents that people try to hide. I have eyes that see what isn't there. I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a small, high-intensity LED flashlight I used for document inspection. I clicked it on and shone the beam across the paper at a low angle. My father stiffened. "What are you doing? It is just a standard form. Brad said you just need to sign it so we can wire the funds." I ignored him. Under the harsh light, the paper revealed its secrets. There were indentations. Deep, ghostly grooves pressed into the fiber of the paper. Someone had placed another sheet of paper on top of this one and practiced signing a name over and over again, pressing down hard, trying to get the muscle memory right, trying to trace the flow of the letters. They had been practicing my signature. I moved the light slowly, tracing the invisible grooves, the loop of the T, the sharp angle of the W. It was a clumsy attempt, but it was there. They had tried to forge my signature, probably on the power of attorney document I had found earlier online. But they must have gotten cold feet. Or the lender demanded a wet signature for this specific loan. So they came here hoping to bully me into signing it legitimately, or perhaps hoping to distract me while they swapped the papers. I turned off the light and looked at my father. He was sweating profusely now, the drops running down his temple. "Who practiced this, Dad?" I asked, my voice quiet. "Was it you? Or was it Brad?" He blinked rapidly. "What are you talking about? Practiced what?" I turned the paper around and shoved it toward him. "The indentations," I said, pointing to the ghost signature. "You can see the pressure marks. Someone put a piece of paper over this one and traced my signature repeatedly. They were using this form as a backing sheet. They were practicing to commit a felony." My father's face turned a shade of gray I had never seen before. "That is ridiculous," he stammered. "You are seeing things. You and your paranoid forensic nonsense. Brad just... he doodles." He was probably just doodling. "Doodling my name?" I asked. "In the exact spot where a signature goes?" I stood up and walked around the desk. I needed to be closer. I needed him to understand that the dynamic had shifted forever. "I found the mortgage application, Dad," I said. "I found the power of attorney filing. I know you tried to put a lien on Grandma's house. I know you tried to forge my name to do it. And when that didn't work fast enough, you came here to try and trick me into signing a loan guarantee for Brad's gambling money." My father stood up too, trying to use his height to intimidate me. "It used to work when I was 12. It did not work now." "It is not gambling," he shouted, his voice cracking. "It is an investment. We are trying to build something. Why do you always have to be the obstacle? Why do you have to be so selfish?" "Selfish?" I laughed, a harsh sound that echoed off the glass walls. "I paid off your car. I paid for Ebony's wedding dress. I have been paying your cell phone bill for 6 years. And you try to steal my house? The house belongs to the family," he roared, slamming his hand down on my desk. "Your grandmother was senile. She didn't know what she was doing, leaving it all to you. I am the patriarch. I am the head of this house. That property is mine by blood right." And there it was, the entitlement, the belief that because he birthed me, he owned me. The belief that my success was simply a reservoir for him to drain at his leisure. "You tried to forge my signature," I said, leaning in close. "Do you know how many years in prison that carries? Do you know what happens when I hand this document over to the FBI as evidence of intent to defraud?" He froze. The mention of the FBI cut through his rage like a knife. "You wouldn't," he whispered. "I am your father." "You stopped being my father when you tried to make me homeless to fund a scam," I said. "Now you are just a suspect." I reached for the phone on my desk. "Get out," I said. He stared at me, his eyes bulging. "You ungrateful little..." "I made you. Do you hear me? I made you. Everything you have is because of me. You think you are so special in your high-rise office? You are nothing without me." I pressed the button for security. "I have a trespasser in office 402, I said into the receiver, my eyes never leaving his. "Please remove him." And if he resists, call the police. My father looked at me with pure hatred. It wasn't the anger of a parent. It was the anger of a parasite that had been ripped away from its host. You will regret this, Tiana, he spat. You will need us one day. And we won't be there. I hope not, I said. Two uniformed security guards appeared at the door. My father straightened his jacket, trying to salvage some shred of dignity. He looked at the guards, then back at me. I am leaving, he announced to the room at large. My daughter is having a mental breakdown. We will pray for her. He walked out, head held high, leaving the scent of cheap cologne and desperation in his wake. I waited until the elevator doors dinged down the hall. Then I sat back down in my chair. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from the adrenaline of finally severing the limb that had been poisoning me for decades. I looked at the document on my desk. I picked up a pair of tweezers from my drawer and carefully placed the paper into a plastic evidence bag. I wasn't done. He thought he could come into my sanctuary and threaten me? He thought he could claim ownership of my life? I pulled my keyboard closer. I opened the file labeled Clarence Williams, Tax History. If he wanted to talk about ownership, we could talk about ownership. Specifically, the ownership of the 3 shell companies he had been using to hide income from the IRS for the last decade. I started typing. I was going to draft a suspicious activity report, and I was going to send it to the one agency that cared even less about family ties than I did, the IRS. The rain in Atlanta does not fall gently. It hammers against the earth like it is trying to wash away the sins of the city, and tonight it was pounding against the windshield of my sedan with a violence that matched the throbbing in my temples. The drive from the financial district to my neighborhood usually took 30 minutes, but the storm had turned the interstate into a parking lot of red brake lights and blurred asphalt. The rhythmic slap of the windshield wipers was the only sound in the car, a metronome counting down the seconds until my next crisis. I gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. My father's cologne, a cloying mix of musk and desperation, still clung to my blazer. I could still see the look in his eyes when I kicked him out of my office. It wasn't just anger, it was shock. For 29 years, I had been the silent partner in their business of dysfunction. I was the one who fixed the credit scores. I was the one who negotiated with the debt collectors. I was the one who made the problems go away. Today, I had become the problem. I glanced at the passenger seat where the plastic evidence bag containing the forged loan guarantee sat. That piece of paper was a felony. It was a prison sentence, and it was my father's signature on his own warrant. My phone rang. The sound cut through the noise of the rain like a gunshot. The dashboard display lit up. Mom. I stared at it. My first instinct was to let it go to voicemail. I had nothing left to say to Bernice Williams. She had tried to steal my identity. She had tried to leverage my home. She had sat by while her husband tried to bully me into financial ruin. But then the forensic accountant in me took over. In my line of work, you never ignore a source when they are emotional. That is when they make mistakes. That is when they tell you where the money is hidden. I tapped the screen to answer, but I did not put it on the car speakers. I put on my earpiece. And then, with a muscle memory born of professional necessity, I tapped the app on my phone that recorded calls. This is Tiana. I said, my voice flat. I expected screaming. I expected the fake tears she used to manipulate the church deacons. I expected the gaslighting about how I was overreacting. Instead, her voice was low, calm, and dripping with a cold, venomous hatred I had never heard before. You think you are smart, don't you, Tiana? The tone sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This wasn't the bougie socialite who wanted free lobster. This was the woman beneath the mask. I think I am protecting myself, Mom, I said, keeping my eyes on the wet road. Dad came to my office. He tried to forge my signature on a loan document. I know, she said. I sent him. My foot eased off the gas pedal. You sent him? Of course I sent him, she spat. We need that money, Tiana. Brad has a liquidity issue. He needs to cover a position before the market closes on Friday. We are a family. We pool our resources. But you have always been a hoarder. You hoard your money, you hoard your affection, and you hoard your gratitude. Gratitude? I asked incredulously. For what? For stealing my credit score? For keeping you, she hissed. The car seemed to go silent even though the rain was deafening outside. Excuse me? I whispered. You heard me. You are so arrogant walking around with your degrees and your suits thinking you made yourself. You think you are better than us because you know how to read a balance sheet. But let me tell you something about your balance sheet, Tiana. You started in the red. You were a liability from the day you were born. I merged into the right lane, my hands shaking. Mom, you are upset. We should not do this. No, we are doing this, she cut me off. You want to talk about facts? Let us talk about facts. You are just like him. You are just like your biological father. That selfish, drug-addled loser who left me with a belly full of problems and empty pockets. You have his cold eyes. You have his selfishness. Every time I look at you, I see the mistake I made in 1994. I felt the tears prickling my eyes, but I forced them back. I checked the recording timer. 1 minute 30 seconds. Keep her talking, Tiana. Get it all on tape. My biological father had died of an overdose when I was 3. My mother had always painted herself as the saint who saved me, the martyr who raised a child alone until she met Clarence. You always said you loved him. I said, my voice trembling despite my best efforts. You said he was a tragic soul. I said that because it looked good at the funeral, she scoffed. The truth is, I should have left you at the fire station. I should have put you in the system. Do you know how close I came? I had the papers ready, Tiana. I was going to sign you over to the state. But then I met Clarence, and Clarence wanted a family. He wanted to look like a good man. So I kept you. I kept you as a prop. A prop. The word hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I realized then that my entire childhood had been a transaction. The dance recitals she attended but never watched. The report cards she bragged about to her friends but never put on the fridge. It wasn't love. It was marketing. I was an accessory she wore to prove she was a good Christian woman. So, that is all I am to you? I asked softly. An investment that did not pay off? Oh, you paid off. Bernice laughed, a dry, hacking sound. For a while, you were a good little worker bee. You paid the bills. You fixed the credit. But now? Now you think you own things. You think that house is yours? You think that money is yours? It is mine, Mom. My name is on the deed. My name is on the accounts. Your name is on it because I allowed you to have a name, she screamed, losing her composure. I fed you. I clothed you. I sacrificed my youth for you. Everything you earn belongs to me. It is restitution, Tiana. You owe me for every diaper I changed. You owe me for every date I missed because I couldn't get a babysitter. You owe me for existing, and since you refuse to pay voluntarily, I am going to take what is mine. You can't take what you can't touch, I said, trying to sound braver than I felt. I blocked the accounts. I flagged the credit. You are done, Mom. There was a pause on the other end. A long, heavy silence filled only by the sound of her breathing. You think you blocked everything, she said, her voice dropping back to that terrifying calm. You think you are the only one who knows how to handle paperwork? You forget, Tiana. I raised you. I know where you keep your spare keys. I know your security questions. And I know that you are still an hour away from home because of the traffic. What does that mean? I asked, my heart hammering against my ribs. It means you should drive safe, honey, she said. It is a wet night. And you have a surprise waiting for you. Click. The line went dead. I stared at the phone. The recording saved automatically. 4 minutes and 12 seconds of verbal abuse. 4 minutes and 12 seconds of a mother admitting she viewed her child as a financial asset to be liquidated. I pressed the gas pedal. I didn't care about the rain anymore. I didn't care about the speed limit. A cold knot of dread had formed in my stomach, heavy as lead. What did she mean she knew where I kept my spare keys? I had changed the locks when I bought the house from my grandmother's estate. I had never given her a key. Unless I remembered a barbecue 3 months ago. The only time I had hosted them since the renovation was finished. I had left my purse on the kitchen counter while I was grilling in the backyard. Ebony had been inside using the bathroom for a suspiciously long time. Had she taken my keys? Had she made a copy? I wove through traffic, cutting off a semi-truck, ignoring the blast of its horn. The exit for my neighborhood came up, and I took it too fast, my tires hydroplaning slightly on the slick asphalt before gripping the road again. I turned onto Oak Street. It was a quiet street lined with old pecan trees and craftsman bungalows. The streetlights were flickering in the storm, casting long dancing shadows across the lawns. I saw my house at the end of the block. At first glance, it looked normal. The porch light was on just as I had left it on a timer. My grandmother's azalea bushes were thrashing in the wind. But as I pulled into the driveway, my headlights swept across the front door. Something was wrong. There was a muddy footprint on the white paint of the doorframe, and a large, dark object was sitting on the porch swing. I parked the car and jumped out, not bothering with an umbrella. The rain soaked me instantly, plastering my hair to my face, mixing with the cold sweat on my skin. I ran up the steps. The object on the swing was a suitcase. My suitcase. The one I kept in the guest closet for business trips. It was thrown haphazardly onto the seat, one of the wheels dangling off the edge. Next to it was a cardboard box filled with my clothes, my blazers, my shoes, my underwear. All of it soaking wet, ruined by the driving rain. My breath hitched in a sob. I reached for the doorknob. I jammed my key into the lock. It didn't turn. I tried again, jiggling it, twisting it hard enough to bend the metal. It wouldn't budge. I pulled the key out and looked at the lock. It was shiny, new. The brass was unweathered. They had changed the locks. I stepped back, looking up at the house. The lights were on inside. I could see shadows moving behind the curtains in the living room. My living room. I pounded on the door. "Open this door!" I screamed, my voice cracking. "Open this door right now!" The curtain in the front window moved. I saw a face. It was Ebony. She was holding a glass of wine. My wine. She looked out at me, standing in the rain, shivering and furious. And then she smiled. It was a slow, cruel smile that reminded me exactly of the one my mother had worn at the restaurant. She raised the glass in a mock toast and let the curtain fall back into place. I stood there, the rain running down my back, the realization crashing over me like a wave. They hadn't just tried to get a loan. They had executed a takeover. They had used the forged power of attorney, or a fraudulent lease agreement, or simply brute force to seize possession of the property while I was at work. They knew the law. They knew that once someone establishes residency, even illegally, it is a civil matter. The police won't kick them out without a court order. They knew that eviction takes months. They had stolen my home. I looked down at the box of my ruined clothes. I saw a picture frame face down in the mud. I picked it up. It was a photo of me and my grandmother taken the day I graduated college. The glass was shattered. A scream built up in my throat, a primal sound of rage and grief, but I swallowed it down. Screaming would give them what they wanted. They wanted the angry black woman. They wanted the scene. They wanted the neighbors to call the cops on me so they could play the victims. I was not going to give them that. I pulled out my phone. My hand was shaking so badly I almost dropped it. I opened the recording of my mother's call. I backed it up to the cloud. I backed it up to a secure server. I emailed it to my lawyer. Then I walked back to my car. I sat in the driver's seat, dripping wet, shivering uncontrollably. I looked at the house one last time. I saw the silhouette of Brad walking past the window. He was probably looking for my liquor cabinet. They thought they had won. They thought that by changing the locks they had locked me out of my life. But they didn't understand forensic accounting. You don't need a key to get into a house when you know how to dismantle the foundation. I put the car in reverse. I wasn't going to bang on the door all night. I wasn't going to call the police to file a noise complaint. I was going to Aunt May's, and tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. sharp, I was going to file a report that would turn 124 Oak Street from a party house into a federal crime scene. Mom wanted to talk about who owned what? Fine. We would let the federal government decide. I stood in the driveway of 124 Oak Street and watched the rain destroy my life. It was not a metaphorical destruction. It was literal. My belongings were scattered across the front lawn like garbage after a frat party. The cardboard boxes I had stored in the guest closet were overturned, their contents spilling out into the mud. I walked toward the pile, my expensive Italian leather heels sinking into the sodden grass. I did not care about the shoes. I cared about what I saw lying in a puddle of dirty water. It was my diploma. My Master of Science in Forensic Accounting, framed in mahogany glass, shattered the parchment, soaking up the brown sludge. Next to it was a quilt. My grandmother had sewn that quilt by hand from scraps of my grandfather's old work shirts. It was the only thing I had left of him. Now it was heavy with rain, matted with leaves and ruin. I picked it up. The water ran down my arms, mixing with the rain and the cold sweat of shock. They hadn't just moved me out. They had violated me. They had gone through my drawers, my closets, my private sanctuary, and they had decided what was trash. Apparently, everything I owned was trash. I looked up at the house. The windows were glowing with a warm, inviting light, the kind of light that usually welcomed me home after a 14-hour day chasing white-collar criminals. I could see movement inside, shadows dancing against the sheer curtains I had custom-ordered from France. I heard music. It was jazz. My jazz. They were playing my vinyl collection on my turntable. A shadow crossed the window. It was Ebony. She was laughing, her head thrown back, a champagne flute in her hand. Something inside me snapped. It was not a loud snap. It was the quiet, terrifying sound of a steel cable parting under too much tension. I dropped the quilt in the mud. I marched up the front steps, the wood slick under my feet. I did not knock. I pounded. I hit the solid oak door with the flat of my hand, the sound echoing like a gunshot over the storm. "Open this door," I screamed. "Open it, or I swear to God I will kick it down." The music did not stop. The laughter did not stop. I pounded again, harder this time, feeling the skin on my palm bruise. "Open the door." "Brad! Open the door!" "Ebony!" Finally, I saw the shadow in the peephole darken. The deadbolt slid back with a heavy click. The door swung open. Brad stood there. He was wearing one of my bathrobes, a white plush robe I kept for guests. It was too small for him, the sleeves riding up his forearms, the belt tied loosely around his waist, exposing his chest. He was holding a bottle of Dom Perignon. My Dom Perignon, the bottle I had been saving for the day I made partner. He leaned against the doorframe, a lazy smirk playing on his lips. "Well, hello there, neighbor," he drawled, his voice thick with unearned arrogance. "You are making an awful lot of noise for this time of night. The HOA is going to write you up if you aren't careful." I stared at him. The sheer audacity of it stole the breath from my lungs. "Get out of my house," I said, my voice trembling with a mixture of rage and hypothermia. "Get out of my house right now. Take your wife and get out before I call the police." Brad chuckled. He took a sip from the bottle straight from the neck, wiping his mouth with the sleeve of my robe. "Your house?" he asked, acting confused. "I think you are confused, Tiana. This isn't your house. Not anymore." He reached into the pocket of the robe and pulled out a folded piece of paper. He waved it in front of my face like he was taunting a dog with a treat. "See this? This is a quitclaim deed, signed, sealed, and delivered. Your parents just gifted this property to Ebony. It is a late wedding present, since you know you didn't get us anything nice." I snatched at the paper, but he pulled it back too quick. "My parents cannot gift you this house," I said, my teeth chattering. "They do not own it. I own it. My name is on the deed. My grandmother left it to me." Brad tutted, shaking his head mockingly. "Technically, yes, your name was on the deed. But you see, Tiana, You are a very generous sister. You signed a power of attorney document a long time ago. A very broad, very unrestricted power of attorney, giving your mother, Bernice Williams, full legal authority to act on your behalf regarding all real estate and financial assets. I froze. The memory hit me like a physical blow. I was 18. It was the week before I left for college. My mother had put a stack of papers in front of me on the kitchen table. Just standard forms, baby, she had said, smiling that warm maternal smile she used before the mask slipped. In case you get sick at school, in case we need to access your grades or your medical records. You trust your mama, don't you? I had trusted her. I had signed everything without reading. I was a child leaving home for the first time, and I thought she was protecting me. I never revoked it. I had forgotten it even existed. That power of attorney expired. I said, my mind racing, trying to recall the statutes. It has been 10 years. Brad laughed. Actually, in Georgia, a durable power of attorney stays valid until you die, or until you revoke it in writing. And since you were too busy being a big-shot corporate accountant to handle your housekeeping, Mommy used her legal right to transfer the asset. She signed the deed over to Ebony on your behalf this afternoon. We just got the notary stamp an hour ago. He leaned in closer, his breath smelling of expensive grapes and stale cigarettes. It is legal, Tiana. Unethical? Maybe. But legal. You gave her the power. She just used it. I felt the blood drain from my face. They had planned this. They had kept that document for a decade, waiting for the moment I had something worth stealing. They had waited until the house was renovated, until the value had tripled, and then they had struck. Ebony appeared behind him. She was wearing my silk pajamas. She looked at me standing in the rain, shivering, my hair plastered to my skull, and she smiled. It wasn't a smile of triumph. It was a smile of relief. The relief of a parasite that had finally found a new host. "Hey, sis," she said, swirling her wine glass. "Thanks for the housewarming gift. It is a little bigger than what we wanted, but we will make it work. I am turning your office into a closet. All those computers were ruining the vibe. My office, my servers, my evidence." "You touched my computers?" I whispered. Brad shrugged. "We put them out on the curb with the rest of your junk. Hopefully they are waterproof. If not, maybe you can write them off on your taxes. You are good at taxes, right?" I looked past him into the living room. My sanctuary. My furniture was pushed against the walls. They were treating it like a frat house. They were celebrating the theft of my life. "This is fraud," I said, my voice finding its steel. "Using a power of attorney for self-enrichment is a breach of fiduciary duty. It is a crime, Brad. I will sue you. I will sue Mom. I will bury you." Brad's smile vanished. His eyes went cold and hard. "You can try," he said. "You can spend the next 2 years in civil court. You can spend $50,000 on lawyers. And while you do that, we will be living here. We will be sleeping in your bed. We will be eating off your plates. And by the time a judge even looks at the file, we will have taken out so many loans against this equity that the house won't be worth the legal fees." He stepped forward, looming over me. "Face it, Tiana. You lost. You thought you could cut us off? You thought you could embarrass us at the restaurant and walk away? We are family. You owe us. This house is just the back payment for raising you." He looked down at me with pure disgust. "Now get off my porch. You are getting mud on the welcome mat." I didn't move. I couldn't move. The shock was starting to wear off, replaced by a cold, terrifying clarity. They truly believed they were entitled to this. They believed that my hard work was their inheritance. Brad sighed. He looked around the porch and spotted something leaning against the railing. It was an old umbrella, one with a broken spoke that I kept for gardening. He picked it up and tossed it at me. It hit me in the chest and clattered to the wet concrete. "Here," he said. "Take this. I don't want you catching pneumonia and dying before you can sign over your 401k too." Ebony laughed, a cruel, high-pitched sound. "Go find a hotel, Tiana," she called out. Or maybe go sleep in your office, since you love working so much. Brad grabbed the door handle. Don't come back without an appointment, he said. We value our privacy. He slammed the door. The sound echoed in the night, final and absolute. I heard the deadbolt slide home. Then I heard the chain lock slide into place. I stood there alone in the dark. The rain was falling harder now, a torrential downpour that soaked through my blazer and chilled me to the bone. I looked down at the broken umbrella at my feet. I did not pick it up. I turned around and looked at the pile of my life on the lawn. My diploma was dissolving. My grandmother's quilt was ruined. My computers, my hard drives containing years of work were sitting in a puddle. I walked over to the stack of electronics. I picked up my main hard drive. Water poured out of the port. It was dead. The evidence I had on my father, the tracking I had done on Brad's crypto wallets, it was likely gone or corrupted. They had not just stolen my house, they had tried to blind me. But they had made a mistake. A massive, fatal mistake. They thought the computers were the weapon. They thought the house was the asset. They forgot that I was the weapon. My brain was the asset. I walked to my car. I did not look back at the house. I did not look at the warm light spilling from the windows. That wasn't my home anymore. It was a crime scene. I got into the driver's seat and locked the doors. I turned on the heater, blasting it to stop the shivering. I pulled out my phone. It was wet, but waterproof. I did not call a hotel. I did not call the police. The police would just say it was a civil dispute. They would see the deed transfer and tell me to get a lawyer. I needed more than a lawyer. I needed a witness. I looked across the street. The house directly opposite mine was dark, except for a single blue light flickering in the front window. It was the glow of a television set. Mrs. May Jenkins lived there. To my parents, she was the crazy old lady who smoked on her porch and yelled at kids. To the neighborhood, she was a nuisance. To me, she was Aunt May, my mother's estranged sister. The woman who had been cut off from the family 20 years ago because she refused to let my father borrow money for a pyramid scheme. She sat on her porch all day. She saw everything. She had security cameras installed on every corner of her house because she was paranoid about the government. I put the car in gear and drove 50 feet across the street. I pulled into her driveway. I got out and walked up to her door. I rang the bell. It took a minute. I heard the sound of multiple locks undoing. The door opened a crack held by a chain. Aunt May peered out. She was wearing a floral caftan and holding a lit cigarette. Her eyes narrowed as she looked at me, soaking wet and shivering. "Tiana?" she rasped. "What in the hell are you doing out in this storm? You look like a drowned rat." "They took the house, Aunt May," I said, my voice cracking for the first time. "They used a forged power of attorney. They changed the locks." May didn't look surprised. She didn't gasp. She just took a long drag of her cigarette and blew the smoke out through the crack in the door. "I know," she said. "I watched them do it. I watched that husband of Ebony's break the lock with a drill this afternoon. I called the cops, but they said he showed them papers." She undid the chain and opened the door wide. "Get in here, girl," she said. "You are letting the air conditioning out." I stepped inside. The house smelled of menthol and lavender. It was cluttered but clean. "I got soup on the stove," May said, walking toward the kitchen. "And I got towels in the bathroom. Dry yourself off." I started to cry then, just a little, just a release of the pressure. Aunt May stopped and turned around. She looked at me with eyes that were hard and black and identical to my mother's, except they held no malice, only a weary understanding of how rot spreads in a family tree. "Stop that crying," she ordered. "Crying don't pay the rent." She walked over to a small table by the window where a monitor was set up. It showed a grid of camera feeds. One of them was pointed directly at my front door across the street. "I got it all on tape," she said, tapping the screen. "I got audio too. I upgraded the microphones last week. I heard Brad on the phone with his bookie. I heard him bragging about how he tricked the dumb bitch. That is you, by the way." I wiped my eyes. "He called me that?" "He called you worse," May said. "But that ain't the point. The point is, I got him admitting on tape that he knew the power of attorney was invalid because your mama told him she tricked you into signing it under false pretenses. She looked at me and grinned, revealing gold-capped molars. That is fraud, baby. That is conspiracy. And since he used the mail to file the deed? That is mail fraud. I felt a cold smile touch my own lips. Federal charges, I whispered. May nodded. Federal. We aren't going to sue them, Tiana. We are going to indict them. She reached into a drawer and pulled out a fresh pack of cigarettes. Now go get dry. We have a long night ahead of us. I kept all the letters, too. The ones Grandma wrote to me before she died. The ones where she said she was leaving the house to you specifically to keep it away from Bernice. It proves intent. I walked toward the bathroom. I could still feel the phantom pain of the umbrella hitting my chest, but the cold was fading. Brad had told me to find a hotel. He had told me not to disturb their privacy. He had no idea that he had just moved into a glass house, and I was standing across the street with a pile of stones. I stood in the bathroom of Aunt May's house, drying myself with a towel that felt like sandpaper, but smelled like salvation. It smelled of lavender laundry detergent and stale cigarette smoke, a combination that instantly transported me back to my childhood summers, the ones before my mother decided her sister was too low class for us to associate with. I wiped the steam from the mirror and stared at my reflection. My mascara had run down my cheeks in jagged black lines, making me look like a weeping clown. My hair, usually pressed and polished into corporate perfection, was a frizzy, damp halo around my face. I looked wrecked. I looked like a woman who had just lost everything. But as I stared into my own eyes, I saw something else flickering behind the exhaustion. A spark. A cold, hard ember of fury. They had taken my shelter. They had taken my clothes. They had taken my sentimental treasures. But they hadn't taken my mind. And my mind was a weapon they were woefully unequipped to fight. I walked out into the living room, wrapping the oversized towel around my shoulders like a cape. Aunt May was sitting in her recliner, a throne of faded floral upholstery, surrounded by stacks of tabloids and an army of ceramic cats. She pointed a gnarled finger at the small formica table in the kitchen nook. "Sit," she commanded, her voice sounding like gravel crunching under tires. "Eat. It ain't lobster, but it will keep you alive." It was a bowl of tomato soup and a grilled cheese sandwich cut into triangles. Simple, hot, real. I sat down and took a bite, and the warmth spread through my chest, thawing the ice that had settled around my heart out in the rain. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that moment. I hadn't realized how starved I was for a simple act of care that didn't come with a price tag attached. "Why did you let me in?" I asked, my voice raspy. "Mom said you hated us. She said you were a bitter old woman who threw bricks at people." May let out a bark of laughter that turned into a hacking cough. She tapped her cigarette into a heavy crystal ashtray. "Your mama has a way of rewriting history to make herself the victim. I didn't throw a brick at her. I threw a brick at the repo man's truck when he came to take her car 20 years ago, and she tried to blame it on me to save face with the neighbors." She looked at me, her dark eyes shrewd and unblinking. "I never hated you, Tiana. I hated what they were doing to you. I watched you grow up from across the street. I saw you sitting on that porch doing your homework while they were inside throwing parties. I saw you walking to the bus stop in shoes that were too small because Clarence needed a new suit. I tried to step in once when you were 10. I brought you a winter coat. Bernice threw it in the trash right in front of me, said they didn't need my charity." I lowered my sandwich. I remembered that coat. It was red with gold buttons. I had found it in the garbage bin the next day and hidden it in the back of my closet. I wore it only when I was alone in my room, pretending I was someone else, someone who was loved. "So you just watched?" I asked, the old hurt surfacing. "I watched, and I waited," May corrected. "I knew Bernice. She is like a termite. She eats everything around her until the structure collapses. I knew eventually she would run out of wood and she would come for the foundation. You are the foundation, Tiana. You always have been. She stood up, groaning slightly as her knees popped. She walked over to a bookshelf crammed with porcelain figurines and paperback thrillers. She reached behind a ceramic cat and pulled out a small silver object, a USB drive. She tossed it onto the table next to my soup. It skittered across the surface and hit my spoon with a metallic clink. "What is this?" I asked. That May said, settling back into her chair as the end of their little party. I looked at the drive, then at her. "You said you have cameras?" I said, remembering the monitor by the window I had glanced at when I walked in. May nodded. "I got cameras. I got microphones. I got a system better than the Pentagon. I told you I knew this day was coming. When I saw that husband of Ebony's parking his truck on your lawn this afternoon, I hit record." She gestured to the laptop sitting on the coffee table. "Go ahead. Plug it in. You need to see this." I didn't want to see it. I didn't want to watch the violation of my home in high definition. But I was a forensic accountant. I dealt in facts, not feelings. I needed to know exactly what I was up against. I picked up the drive and plugged it into the laptop. A folder popped up labeled "The Heist." May had a sense of humor. I clicked the first video file. The timestamp was 2:15 p.m. today. The sun was still out. The camera angle was perfect. It was high up, probably mounted on May's eaves, looking directly across the street at my front door. The audio was crisp thanks to whatever upgrade she had mentioned. I saw Brad's truck pull into my driveway. He got out wearing work boots and jeans, looking like he was ready to do manual labor for the first time in his life. He walked up to my front door and rang the bell. He waited. He rang it again. Then he waved at the car. Ebony got out. She was holding a clipboard. My mother got out from the back seat. She was looking around nervously, checking the street. They walked up to the porch. "Mom, this feels sketchy," Ebony said, her voice clear on the recording. "What if the neighbors call the cops?" "Let them call my mother," said, smoothing her dress. "We have the deed. We have the paperwork. Possession is 9/10 of the law, Ebony. Once we are inside, it is a civil matter. The police won't do anything. Just get the door open." Brad pulled a cordless drill from his belt. "This is going to be loud," he said. He drilled straight into my deadbolt. Metal shavings flew onto the welcome mat. It took him less than 2 minutes. The lock gave way with a crack. They were in. I watched as they disappeared into my house. I watched as they came back out 5 minutes later carrying boxes. My boxes. They were laughing. I fast-forwarded. Timestamp 4:30 p.m. Brad came out onto the porch alone. He was holding a cell phone. He leaned against the railing right where I had stood shivering an hour ago. He dialed a number. "Yo, Tony," he said into the phone. "Yeah, it is done. We are in. No complications. The locksmith wasn't even needed. I did it myself. Yeah, the deed is filed." He paused, listening to the person on the other end. "Yeah, the dumb bitch is still at work. She has no idea. She thinks she is a big-shot auditor, but she forgot she signed her life away when she was 18. We got the house, man. It is prime real estate, appraised at 600,000. My stomach churned. 600,000. That was the equity I had built. That was my blood and sweat. He laughed. "No, I am not worried about her. What is she going to do? Sue her own mother? She is too soft. She is desperate for them to love her. She will cry about it for a week, and then she will offer to pay the utilities. Watch. I know how to handle Tiana. You just gotta make her feel guilty." He took a cigarette out of his pocket and lit it, flicking the match onto my porch. "Yeah, we can use the property as collateral for the loan by Friday. I already sent the paperwork to Quick Cash. They just needed proof of occupancy. We got occupancy, baby. We are throwing a party tonight. Come through." He hung up. He took a drag of the cigarette and looked out at the street right at May's camera. He blew a smoke ring. "Too easy," he muttered. The video ended. I sat there staring at the black screen. The soup in my stomach had turned to lead. He called me soft. He said I would offer to pay the utilities. He said I was desperate for them to love me. The worst part was that he wasn't entirely wrong. The old Tiana, the one who existed before tonight, might have done exactly that. She might have tried to negotiate. She might have tried to find a compromise to keep the peace. But that Tiana had died in the rain on her own doorstep. I looked up at Aunt May. She was watching me through a haze of smoke. "You hear that?" she asked, pointing her cigarette at the screen. He admitted to the scheme. He admitted to the fraudulent loan application. He admitted that he knew the power of attorney was being used deceitfully. That is intent, Tiana. That is conspiracy to commit wire fraud. I nodded slowly, and he used the phone to facilitate it. I said, my voice sounding strange to my own ears. "Cold. Mechanical. That is wire fraud. He filed the deed electronically. That is another count. And if they mailed anything to the lender, mail fraud." May finished with a grin revealing gold-capped molars. The trifecta. She leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "You got him, Tiana. You got him on tape confessing to the whole thing. You don't need a civil lawsuit. You don't need to evict them. You can have the feds kick down that door." I looked back at the laptop. I looked at the freeze frame of Brad's arrogant face, his smirk illuminated by the porch light. He was right about one thing. I was desperate. But I wasn't desperate for their love anymore. I was desperate for justice. I closed the laptop. The click was sharp and decisive. I stood up and walked to the window. I looked across the street at my house. The lights were still blazing. They were probably opening another bottle of my wine. They were probably toasting to their genius. They thought they had won. They thought they had stolen the castle. They didn't realize they had locked themselves inside the prison. I turned back to Aunt May. "I need to make a call," I said. "Not to my lawyer. I need to call an old friend from grad school. He works at the Atlanta field office of the FBI. He owes me a favor for helping him with his forensic accounting final." May smiled. "Now you are talking like a Williams. A real Williams, not those counterfeits across the street." I pulled out my phone. It was dry now. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name. Agent Miller. I pressed call. It was late, but he would answer. He was like me. He worked when the bad guys were sleeping. "This isn't a dispute about a deed anymore," I told May as the phone rang. "This is a criminal enterprise, and I'm going to treat it like one." May nodded. "You do what you gotta do, baby. I got the popcorn ready." Agent Miller answered on the third ring. "Tiana? Everything okay?" "No." "David?" I said, my voice steady and sharp as a scalpel. "I need to report a crime in progress. I have video evidence of bank fraud, identity theft, and a confession to conspiracy. The subjects are currently located at 124 Oak Street." "And David?" "Yeah? Bring the handcuffs. I have a feeling you are going to need 3 pairs." I hung up the phone. I looked at my reflection in the window. My hair was drying in wild curls. My eyes were dark and hard. I didn't look like the victim anymore. I looked like the hunter. I sat back down at the table and picked up my spoon. The soup was cold, but I ate it anyway. I needed my strength. Tomorrow was going to be a very busy day. And I wasn't paying for anything ever again. For 3 days I became a ghost. To my family I had simply vanished into the ether, a defeated woman who had taken her broken umbrella and her bruised ego to a cheap motel to lick her wounds. They interpreted my silence as surrender, because in their world silence was weakness. They did not understand that in my world, silence is what happens right before the hammer drops. I did not go to a hotel. I did not go to work. I set up a command center in the conference room of Marcus's law firm. It was a windowless room that smelled of lemon polish and billable hours. For 72 hours I lived on black coffee and protein bars surrounded by whiteboards covered in red marker and stacks of financial records that reached the ceiling. I was not alone. Marcus was there handling the civil side, drafting the eviction notices and the restraining orders. And sitting across from me was Special Agent David Miller. We had gone to grad school together. He had copied my notes in advanced auditing, and I had helped him pass his ethics final. Now he was with the FBI's white-collar crimes division, and he was looking at the flow chart I had drawn on the whiteboard with an expression of pure professional awe. While I was building a federal case, my family was building a party. I monitored them through Aunt May's cameras and through their own foolish social media accounts. They were not exactly subtle. They treated my disappearance like a victory lap. On day one, they hired a landscaping crew to rip out my grandmother's prize-winning azaleas because Ebony said they looked dated. I watched on the grainy monitor as the workmen tore up the roots of bushes that had been there for 50 years. I didn't flinch. I just added the cost of the landscaping to the damages column on my spreadsheet. On day two, Ebony posted a series of stories on Instagram that made my blood run cold. She was doing a house tour. My house. "Hey guys," she chirped into the camera holding a glass of my vintage rose. "Welcome to the new crib. We are finally settling in. Check out my new glam room." She pushed open the door to my home office. My sanctuary. The room where I had built my career. It was unrecognizable. My desks were gone, pushed into the hallway, or thrown out, I didn't know. In their place were rolling racks of clothes and a vanity mirror with lights. My ergonomic chair, the one I had spent $1,000 on to save my back, was being used as a step stool for her shoe collection. And there in the corner, used as a coaster for her sweating glass of wine, was my diploma. The glass was cracked, but my name was still visible. Tiana Williams. She laughed at the camera spinning around. "It needs a little work, but the lighting in here is perfect for content creation. Manifestation works, y'all. You just have to claim what is yours." I paused the video. I zoomed in on the background. In the reflection of the mirror, I could see Brad. He was sitting on the floor going through a stack of papers. My papers. My bank statements. My tax returns. He was looking for more money. He was looking for accounts I might have hidden. David Miller leaned over my shoulder looking at the screen. "Is that the husband?" he asked. "That is the husband," I said, my voice devoid of emotion. "That is the man who forged the deed." David nodded. "He is sloppy. He is logging into his crypto wallet on your guest Wi-Fi. We intercepted the traffic an hour ago. He isn't using a VPN. He is moving money, Tiana. A lot of money." "Show me," I said. David tapped his laptop and spun it around. It was a visualization of blockchain transactions, a spider web of digital currency moving from wallet to wallet trying to obscure its origin. "Here's the wallet associated with your parents' joint account," David explained, pointing to a large node. "And here is Brad's primary wallet. See these transfers?" I looked. It was a hemorrhage. $50,000 here, $20,000 there. Over the last 6 months, my parents had drained their retirement accounts, their savings, even the equity from their car. All of it funneled into Brad's wallet. But that wasn't the interesting part. The interesting part was where the money went after it hit Brad's account. It didn't go to investments. It didn't go to Legacy Coin or any legitimate exchange. It went to 3 specific wallets. Anonymous wallets. "I recognize this pattern," I said, leaning in. "This is layering. He is washing the money. But why? If it is just gambling debts, he would pay the bookie directly. Why wash it?" "Because it isn't just your parents' money," David said grimly. "Look at the other inputs." He zoomed out. There were dozens of other wallets feeding into Brad's account. Small amounts. 5,000. 10,000. "Who are these people?" I asked. David pulled up a list of names associated with the transfers. I scanned them. My heart sank. Mrs. Higgins from the church choir. Deacon Jones. The elderly couple who ran the corner store near my parents' old house. "He is running a Ponzi scheme," I whispered. "He is targeting the elderly in our community. He is promising them returns on crypto investments, and he is stealing their life savings." "And your father is the face of it," David added. "We found emails. Your father is the one recruiting them." He is using his reputation as a pillar of the community to get them to trust Brad. He thinks he is a savvy investor, but he is actually a co-conspirator in elder fraud. I sat back feeling sick. My father wasn't just a victim of Brad's charm. He was an active participant. He was selling out his own friends and neighbors to feed the beast. How much? I asked. Total confirmed fraud is just over $2 million, David said. And that is just what we can see. He has been doing this for 18 months. He is using the money to pay off early investors to keep the scheme going and skimming the rest for his lifestyle. That Rolex? The car? It is all bought with stolen pension checks. And now he needs my house, I realized. The scheme is collapsing. He needs a fresh injection of capital to pay off the latest round of investors before they go to the police. That is why they were so desperate at the dinner. That is why they broke into my home. They need the equity to keep the lie alive for another month. Exactly, David said. And because he used the internet to solicit funds and the mail to file the fraudulent deed, he has crossed into federal jurisdiction. Wire fraud, mail fraud, money laundering, identity theft. He looked at me, his expression serious. Tiana, we have enough to arrest him now. We can pick him up tonight. No, I said. David looked surprised. No? Tiana, he is destroying your house. If you arrest him tonight, he will claim it is a misunderstanding, I said. He will claim he had verbal permission. He will claim the money transfers were loans. He is slippery, David. He will throw my father under the bus and try to cut a deal. I stood up and walked to the whiteboard. I picked up a red marker. I want them all, I said. I want Brad. I want Ebony. I want my parents. Ebony? David asked. What did she do? I drew a line connecting Ebony's name to the house. She is living in the proceeds of crime, I said. She knows. I heard them talking on the recording Aunt May made. She knows the deed is forged. She knows the money is stolen. She is an accessory after the fact. And my parents? They aren't just victims. They are recruiters. They are soliciting funds for a fraudulent enterprise. I turned back to David. I don't want a quiet arrest. I want a spectacle. I want everyone they stole from to see exactly who they are. David smiled a slow, dangerous smile. What do you have in mind? I pulled up Instagram on my phone. Ebony had just posted a new story. It was a digital invitation, glittering text over a photo of my swimming pool. Ebony's birthday bash and housewarming. Use the pool, sip the champagne, live the life. Tomorrow night, 8 p.m., VIPs only. She was throwing a party, a birthday party for herself in the house she stole, paid for with money her husband stole from grandmothers. The audacity was so pure it was almost admirable. They are hosting a party tomorrow night, I said, showing David the screen. All the local big shots will be there. My parents will be there showing off. Perfect, David said. We love a party. I looked at the guest list Ebony had tagged. It was a who's who of Atlanta's social climbers, people my parents were desperate to impress. I want the IRS there too, I said. David raised an eyebrow. The IRS? I pulled another file from my stack. This was my masterpiece. It was a forensic reconstruction of my parents' tax returns for the last 10 years versus their actual lifestyle spend. They haven't filed a tax return since 2014, I said. They have been living off credit and scams. They claimed me as a dependent until I was 26. They claimed business losses for businesses that don't exist. They owe the government at least $500,000 in back taxes and penalties. David whistled low and long. Al Capone style, he said. You really want to scorch the earth, don't you? They burned my quilt, I said, my voice flat. They burned my grandmother's quilt. I am just returning the favor. We spent the next 6 hours coordinating. David made calls to the U.S. Attorney's Office securing the warrants. Marcus finalized the civil paperwork, ensuring that the moment the handcuffs went on, I would have legal possession of the property again. By the time we were done, it was dark outside. The city lights of Atlanta twinkled below us, indifferent to the lives that were about to be ruined. I was exhausted, but I felt a strange electric hum in my veins. It was the feeling of closure approaching. I picked up my phone. I had one last thing to do. I opened my messages. I found the thread with Ebony. The last message she had sent me was a picture of my clothes in the rain with the caption, "Cry about it." I typed slowly, my fingers steady. "Enjoy the party tomorrow night. I have a surprise gift for you." I hit send. I watched the delivered receipt appear, then the read receipt. She didn't reply. She probably thought I was bluffing. She probably thought I was going to send a glitter bomb or a nasty letter. She probably laughed and showed the phone to Brad, and they toasted to their victory. Let them laugh. Let them drink my wine. Let them sleep in my sheets one last time. Because tomorrow night the music was going to stop. And when the lights came on, they were going to realize that the house always wins, especially when the house belongs to me. I packed up my files. I nodded to David and Marcus. "See you at the party, boys," I said. I walked out of the office and into the night. The rain had stopped. The air was clear and cold. It was a perfect night for a raid. The bass from the DJ booth was rattling the antique crystal in my grandmother's china cabinet. I could feel the vibrations through the soles of my shoes, even though I was standing 50 feet away on the dark pavement of the street. My house, 124 Oak Street, was glowing like a supernova in the quiet neighborhood. Every light was on. The front door was wide open, spilling golden light and loud music onto the lawn where valet attendants were parking luxury cars that cost more than my parents had earned in the last decade combined. It was Ebony's birthday bash, but it was also a coronation. It was a declaration to all of Atlanta that the Williams family had arrived. They had invited everyone, the local pastors, the business owners, the social climbers who had shunned my parents when they lost their first house were now back sipping my champagne and eating crab cakes in my living room. I stood in the shadows next to Special Agent David Miller. Behind us, 2 unmarked SUVs sat idling their engines, purring quietly. A sheriff's cruiser was parked down the block, lights off, waiting for the signal. "Are you ready?" David asked, his voice low. I adjusted the lapel of my white suit. I had chosen white on purpose. It is the color of mourning in some cultures, but tonight it was the color of cleansing. I was about to bleach the stain out of my life. "I have been ready for 29 years, I said. We walked toward the house. We didn't sneak. We didn't run. We walked with the steady, inevitable pace of consequences. Inside, the party was reaching a fever pitch. I walked up the driveway past the trampled grass where my azaleas used to be. I could see through the large bay window. My mother Bernice was holding court in the center of the room. She was wearing a gold dress that shimmered under the chandelier. She had a glass of wine in one hand, and she was gesturing wildly with the other, talking to Deacon Jones and his wife. I stopped just outside the window to listen. "Oh yes, Brad is a genius," Bernice was saying, her voice carrying over the music. "He moved some assets around for us. Crypto is the future, Deacon. You have to get in now. We just bought this place cash. No mortgage. That is the power of generational wealth." Deacon Jones nodded, looking impressed. "And Tiana? Is she here?" My mother's face tightened just for a second before the mask slipped back into place. "Oh, poor Tiana," she sighed. "She is struggling right now. Mental health is a real crisis in our community. We tried to help her, but she just couldn't handle the pressure of the corporate world. We are letting her stay in our old condo while she gets back on her feet. We pray for her every day." I felt David stiffen beside me. He looked at me, his jaw set. "That is enough," he said. He lifted his radio to his lips. "Cut it." At that exact moment, the power to the house died. The music groaned and warped as the speakers lost power. The chandelier flickered and went dark. The warm golden glow vanished, plunging the party into sudden confused blackness. Screams of surprise erupted from inside. I heard glass breaking. I heard Brad shouting for someone to check the breaker box. Then the second signal was given. A blinding white light flooded the living room. It wasn't the power coming back on. It was a high-intensity spotlight from the tactical vehicle that had just rolled silently onto the front lawn. It cut through the window, illuminating my mother like a deer in headlights. Her gold dress looked cheap and gaudy in the harsh glare. She threw her hands up, shielding her eyes. Blue and red lights erupted from the street, painting the walls of my house in a strobing nightmare of police colors. The sirens chirped, once loud and authoritative, silencing the murmurs of the guests. The front door was still open. I stepped onto the porch. The living room was chaos. Guests were freezing in place, dazzled by the lights. Brad was standing near the fireplace, holding a bottle of vodka, looking like a trapped rat. Ebony was on the staircase, her phone in her hand, probably trying to livestream the blackout. I stepped into the foyer. My heels clicked sharply on the hardwood floor, a sound that cut through the confusion. David walked in beside me, his FBI badge hanging from his neck, catching the strobe lights. Behind him, the sheriff and 4 uniformed deputies filed in, spreading out to secure the exits. The room went deathly silent. The only sound was the crackle of police radios and the heavy breathing of 100 terrified social climbers. My mother lowered her hands. Her eyes adjusted to the light, and she saw me. "Tiana?" she gasped. "What is this? What have you done?" I didn't look at her. I looked at the room. I looked at the faces of the people my parents had lied to. Mrs. Higgins from the choir, the elderly couple from the corner store, the people whose retirement funds were currently sitting in Brad's crypto wallet. "Please remain calm," David announced, his voice booming. "This is a federal operation. Nobody leaves until we have cleared the premises." Brad dropped the vodka bottle. It shattered on the floor, the smell of alcohol mixing with the scent of fear. "This is harassment," he shouted, trying to muster some of his usual bravado. "You can't just barge in here. This is private property. I know my rights. Get out of my house." I stepped forward into the center of the room. The spotlight from outside framed me perfectly. "Your house, Brad?" I asked, my voice calm and projecting to the back of the room. He flinched, looking at me with pure hatred. "Yes, my house," he spat. "The deed is in my wife's name. We have the papers. You are trespassing, Tiana. Officer, arrest her. She is mentally unstable." I smiled. It was the smile of the wolf at the door. "Actually, Brad, I said I'm here to clarify a few accounting errors." I turned to the guests. I saw Deacon Jones looking at me with confusion. I saw the fear in Mrs. Higgins' eyes. "I apologize for ruining the party," I said, "but I think you all deserve to know who is hosting you tonight. You are standing in my home. A home that was stolen from me 3 days ago through a forged deed and identity theft." "Lies!" Ebony screamed from the stairs, rushing down. "She is lying! She is jealous! Mom, tell them!" My mother stepped forward, her face a mask of panic. "Officers, this is a family dispute," she pleaded, grabbing the sheriff's arm. "My daughter is off her medication. She is making things up. Please escort her out so we can continue our celebration." The sheriff gently but firmly removed her hand. "Ma'am, step back," he said. I looked at my mother. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, who had told me I was an investment, who had abandoned me. "You told Deacon Jones that you bought this house with cash," I said. "You told him it was the fruit of generational wealth." I pulled a folder from my bag. I held it up. "This is a forensic audit of the funds used to pay for this party," I said. "It traces the money back to its source. It didn't come from crypto investments. It didn't come from real estate." I looked directly at Mrs. Higgins. "Mrs. Higgins, did you give my father $20,000 last month for a guaranteed investment fund?" Mrs. Higgins trembled, clutching her pearls. "Yes, baby. Clarence said it was a sure thing. He said it was for the church building fund." I opened the folder. "That money went directly into a wallet controlled by Brad," I said. "He used it to pay off his gambling debts on DraftKings. And the $5,000 you gave him last week? That paid for the catering tonight. You are eating your own retirement, Mrs. Higgins." A gasp went through the room. "That is a lie," my father roared, pushing his way through the crowd. Don't listen to her. She is trying to ruin us. She is bitter. David Miller stepped in front of my father, his hand resting near his holster. Clarence Williams, he said. I am Special Agent Miller with the FBI. We have a warrant for your arrest for wire fraud conspiracy to commit money laundering and elder abuse. My father stopped dead. His mouth hung open. And Brad, turn around. David continued looking at my brother-in-law. Brad looked at the window. He looked at the back door where a deputy was standing. He looked at Ebony. Baby. Tell them, he stammered. Tell them it was a loan. Tell them your sister signed the papers. Ebony looked at him, then at the police, then at me. I saw the calculation in her eyes. She was a survivor just like her mother. I didn't know anything, she screamed, backing away from him. He told me it was legal. He told me Tiana gave us the house. Mom said Tiana signed the papers. I didn't do anything. I didn't do. Brad's face crumpled. You lying witch! You helped me pick the lock. Officers, arrest him, David ordered. 2 deputies moved in. They grabbed Brad's arms and spun him around. The click of the handcuffs was the loudest sound in the room. My mother let out a wail. Not my son. You can't take him. He is a businessman. And you, Mrs. Williams, David said, turning to her. We have a warrant for you as well. Identity theft, forgery, and thanks to your daughter's excellent work, tax evasion spanning a decade. My mother froze. She looked at me. For the first time there was no anger in her eyes. Just fear. Naked, terrifying fear. Tiana, she whispered. Tiana, please. Tell them we are family. You can't let them take me. I am your mother. I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had tried to leave me homeless in a storm. I am sorry, Bernice, I said, using her first name. I can't help you. My assets are frozen. Bernice? She whispered as if the name itself was a slap. You wanted the credit, I said. You wanted the lifestyle. Now you get the audit. The deputies moved in on my parents. My father was trying to loosen his tie, hyperventilating. My mother was sobbing, reaching out for anyone who would help her, but the guests were backing away, recoiling as if she were contagious. Ebony was standing alone on the stairs, watching her husband and parents being handcuffed. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a plea for mercy. Tiana, she started. I cut her off. And Ebony? I said, pointing to her. You are wearing my shoes. Take them off. She stared at me. Take them off, I said, my voice hard. And get out of my house. The police aren't arresting you tonight because you are just stupid, not the mastermind. But the IRS is going to want to talk to you about the jewelry you are wearing. Ebony unbuckled the sandals. She threw them on the floor. She ran out the front door barefoot, crying into her hands, past the guests who were now filming the entire scene on their phones. I watched as the police led my family away. My father was weeping. Brad was cursing. My mother looked back at me one last time, her face a mask of ruined mascara and disbelief. I didn't look away. I watched until they were put into the back of the cruisers. The guests began to filter out, silent and shaken. Mrs. Higgins stopped in front of me. She took my hand. Thank you, baby, she whispered. Thank you for telling us. I nodded. I am sorry, Mrs. Higgins. We will try to get it back. The feds seized his wallets. There might be something left. She squeezed my hand and walked out into the night. Eventually, the house was empty. The police left, taking the circus with them. David stayed behind with 2 agents to secure the evidence. I stood in the middle of the living room. The floor was sticky with spilled drinks. The air smelled of stale perfume and disaster. My home was wrecked, but it was mine again. I walked over to the window and looked out. The rain had started again, a soft, cleansing drizzle. The flashing lights were gone. The street was quiet. I was an orphan now. I had made myself one. I took a deep breath. It was the first breath of clean air I had taken in 29 years. The silence in the room was heavier than the humidity outside. The strobe lights had stopped leaving the room, bathed in the stark, unforgiving glare of the police tactical lights. The guests were frozen like statues in a museum of bad decisions, their champagne flutes halfway to their mouths, their eyes darting between the armed agents, and the woman standing in the center of the foyer in a white suit. I walked over to the DJ booth. The DJ, a kid who looked barely old enough to drive, backed away with his hands up. I picked up the microphone. It felt heavy and cold in my hand. A weapon of a different kind. I tapped it once. The sound thumped through the high-end speakers Brad had undoubtedly purchased with stolen money. "Welcome, everyone," I said, my voice amplified and crisp, cutting through the tension like a diamond cutter. "I want to thank you all for attending the inaugural open house for this federally seized property. I hope you enjoyed the crab cakes. They were paid for with your pension funds." Brad lunged forward from where he was being held by two deputies. His face was a mask of purple rage veins bulging in his neck. He looked like a man watching his life disintegrate and trying to hold on to the smoke. "You are crazy," he screamed, spitting on the hardwood floor. "You are absolutely insane, Tiana. This is my house. I have the deed. I have the papers. You are just a jealous, bitter little girl who cannot stand to see us winning." He turned to the sheriff, his eyes wild. "Officer, arrest her. She is trespassing. She is harassing the homeowners. Show him the papers, Ebony. Show him the deed." Ebony was sobbing on the stairs, but she pointed a shaking finger at me. "It is legal," she wailed. "Mom said it was legal. Tiana signed the power of attorney. She gave us permission." I laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. I walked closer to Brad until I was standing just outside of his reach. I wanted him to see my eyes. I wanted him to see that there was no fear left in me, only receipts. "Let us talk about that power of attorney, Brad," I said, speaking into the microphone so every person in the room could hear the legal dissection of his stupidity. "You are referring to the document I signed when I was 18 years old, the one Mom slipped into my financial aid packet." I turned to the crowd. "For those of you who do not know my mother, Bernice Williams has a habit of collecting leverage on her children. She kept that document for 11 years, waiting for the day I had something worth stealing." I turned back to Brad. "But here is the thing about the law, Brad. You have to actually read it. You see, in the state of Georgia, a power of attorney instrument executed before 2017 has specific limitations regarding real estate transactions if it is not re-ratified after a certain period of time, or if the principal, that is me, can prove estrangement. But that is just a civil argument. That is something we could argue about in court for years." I paused, letting the anticipation build. "However, there is a much simpler problem for you. The power of attorney, you used to sign the quitclaim deed? The one you filed electronically with the county clerk yesterday?" I pulled a piece of paper from my pocket. It was a copy of the document Brad had filed. "It has a notary stamp on it," I said. "A notary stamp dated yesterday. Which means a notary public had to witness me, Tiana Williams, signing the document or acknowledging your authority to sign it in person." I looked at David Miller. "Agent Miller, where was I yesterday at 2:15 p.m. when this document was notarized?" David stepped forward, his face impassive. "You were in the federal building giving a sworn deposition regarding an unrelated financial crimes investigation." He lied smoothly. "We have you on video surveillance with 3 federal agents." I looked back at Brad. So I continued. "If I was with the FBI, how could I be in front of a notary giving you my house? Unless, of course, you forged the notary seal. Or maybe you bribed a notary. Either way, Brad, that is not a loophole. That is a felony. It is called forgery in the first degree. And since you used the internet to file it, it is also wire fraud." Brad's face went pale. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. The bluster was gone, replaced by the terrifying realization that he had brought a checkerboard to a chess match. "But that is just the house," I said, my voice dropping an octave. "That is just the crime you committed against me. That is personal. But what you did to everyone else in this room? That is professional." I nodded to David. He signaled to one of the technicians who had set up near the large flat-screen TV that Ebony had been using to display a slideshow of her selfies. The screen flickered. Ebony's face disappeared. In its place, a complex diagram appeared. It was a flowchart. A web of lines and boxes connecting names, dates, and dollar amounts. Gasps rippled through the room. I walked over to the screen using the microphone to point. This, I said, is a forensic reconstruction of the Williams family enterprise. I pointed to a large box at the top labeled Brad's wallet. Brad here has been telling you all that he is a crypto genius. He told you he had an inside line on a new token called Legacy Coin. He promised you 300% returns. He told you it was exclusive. I scanned the room, locking eyes with Deacon Jones. Deacon, you gave him $50,000 from the building fund, didn't you? The deacon nodded slowly, his hand over his mouth. And Mrs. Higgins, I continued, pointing to the elderly choir director. You liquidated your husband's life insurance policy. $25,000. Mrs. Higgins let out a small whimper. I traced the line from their names on the screen down to Brad's wallet. Here is your money hitting Brad's account. Now let us see where it went. Did it go to Legacy Coin? Did it go to the blockchain? I tapped the button on the remote I had taken from the technician. The chart animated. Red lines shot out from Brad's wallet. No, I said. It went to DraftKings. It went to MGM Grand. It went to a shell company called B&C Consulting. I looked at my parents, who were huddled together near the window, looking like they wanted the floor to swallow them whole. B&C Consulting, I said. Bernice and Clarence. The room erupted. People started shouting. You gave my money to them? Mrs. Higgins screamed, pointing a shaking finger at my mother. You said it was an investment, Bernice. You said you were praying over it. My mother shrank back, shaking her head. I didn't know. I thought Brad was investing it. Stop lying, Mom. I snapped into the microphone, silencing her. I have the bank records. I have the transfers. B&C Consulting paid for your condo rent. It paid for your car lease. It paid for the catering at this party. I turned back to the screen. Look at this entry right here, I said, pointing to a transaction dated 3 days ago. $5,000. Labeled event services. That is the money that paid for the champagne you are all drinking. You are drinking your own retirement funds. You are celebrating in a stolen house, eating food bought with stolen money, hosted by people who looked you in the eye at church on Sunday and lied to your faces. Brad struggled against the deputies. Turn it off. You can't show that. That is private financial information. It is evidence, Brad, I said. And it is all going into the discovery file. I clicked the remote again. A new slide appeared. It was a list of tax evasions, and for those of you wondering how they maintained this lifestyle without jobs, here is the answer. They haven't paid taxes since 2014. They have been claiming business losses for companies that don't exist. They have been claiming me as a dependent, even though I haven't lived with them for a decade. I walked over to my father. He was sweating so much his cream suit was stained dark under the arms. You wanted to be a big shot, Dad, I said softly, only for him and the front row to hear. You wanted respect. Well, you got the attention. Are you happy now? He looked at me with eyes that were dead. You ruined us, he whispered. We are your blood. You ruined yourselves, I said, stepping back. I just turned on the lights. I turned to the crowd one last time. The party is over, I said. The FBI is going to need statements from anyone who gave money to Brad or my father. If you want any hope of getting a cent back, I suggest you start lining up to talk to Agent Miller. I dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a thud that felt like a gavel coming down. David moved in. All right, let us wrap this up, he shouted over the rising commotion of the guests. Clarence Williams, Bernice Williams, Bradley Jackson. You are under arrest for conspiracy to commit wire fraud, money laundering, and grand larceny. The deputies moved with precision. They spun my parents around. The click of handcuffs on my father's wrists was a sound I would never forget. He let out a sob, a broken, pathetic sound that stripped away the last veneer of his false dignity. My mother was screaming now, shrieking that she was innocent, that she was a victim, that Brad had tricked her. But the screen behind her told a different story. The flow chart didn't lie. The numbers didn't lie. I watched as they were marched toward the door. Brad was fighting, trying to kick the deputies, screaming obscenities at me. My mother was dragging her feet, her heels scuffing the floor she had tried to steal, looking back at me with a face contorted by betrayal, as if I were the one who had sinned. And Ebony. Ebony was still sitting on the stairs. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't fighting. She was staring at the screen, at the line item that showed how much of the stolen money had gone to her wardrobe. She looked at me. I didn't know she whispered. I walked over to the stairs. I looked down at her, at my sister, who had mocked me, who had helped break into my home, who had tried to erase me. "You knew," I said. "You knew when you saw the new car. You knew when you saw the cash. You knew when you helped him pick the lock. You just didn't care because the check cleared." I pointed to the door. "Go," I said. She stood up, shaky on her legs. She looked at her husband being shoved into a cruiser outside. She looked at her parents being read their rights. "Where am I supposed to go?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "I have nowhere." I looked around my wrecked living room. "Try an Uber," I said. She flinched as if I had slapped her. She grabbed her purse and ran out the door barefoot into the night, her sob story finally meeting its audience of none. The house slowly emptied. The guests filed out, passing the police cruisers, some stopping to give statements, others just fleeing the scene of the crime. I stood alone in the foyer. The spotlight from the tactical truck was turned off, plunging the room back into shadows. The silence returned, but this time it wasn't the silence of secrets. It was the silence of a vacuum. The air had been sucked out of the room, leaving only the truth. I walked over to the wall where my diploma had been. I picked up the frame from the floor where Ebony had kicked it. I brushed off the glass. The paper was stained but legible. I placed it back on the shelf. It was over. The Hydra was dead. I had cut off every head and cauterized the wounds with the truth. I turned to David, who was supervising the evidence collection. "Thank you," I said. He nodded. "Don't thank me, Tiana. You did the work. We just provided the ride." I looked out the window at the flashing lights fading into the distance. I wasn't an orphan. Orphans are victims of circumstance. I was a survivor of choice. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of my own home, reclaimed, restored, and finally mine. The room erupted into a chaos that was almost surgical in its precision. David Miller signaled his team, and the deputies moved with a synchronized efficiency that made the social climbers in the room gasp and recoil. They swarmed Brad Jackson first. My brother-in-law, who had spent the last hour drinking my champagne and bragging about assets he did not own, suddenly looked very small. The arrogance drained out of his face, leaving behind the pale, sweaty reality of a man who knew he had gambled his life and lost. He tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. He took 2 steps toward the French doors leading to the pool terrace, but a deputy was already there, blocking the exit with a hand resting on his holster. Brad stumbled back, knocking over a vase of white lilies that shattered across the floor. The sound was like a gunshot, and it made my mother scream. "Get on the ground!" the deputy shouted, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the terrified guests. Brad did not get on the ground voluntarily. 2 officers grabbed him by the shoulders and forced him down. His knees hit the hardwood with a thud that vibrated through the floorboards. I watched his face pressed against the very floor he had stolen from me. I saw the realization dawn in his eyes. This was not a misunderstanding. This was not something he could talk his way out of with charm and a fake smile. The handcuffs clicked. It was a sharp, metallic sound that signaled the end of his delusions. "It wasn't me," Brad screamed, his voice cracking into a high-pitched wail as they hauled him back to his feet. "I did not do it. I was just following orders. It was Ebony. She made me do it." The room went silent. Every head turned toward my sister, who was standing by the stairs clutching the banister as if it were the only thing keeping her upright. She looked at her husband, her eyes wide with betrayal. What did you say? She whispered, her voice trembling. She told me to do it, Brad shouted, struggling against the deputies. He looked wild, desperate to throw anyone under the bus to save himself. She said her sister was weak. She said Tiana would never fight back. She wanted the house for her Instagram. She wanted the lifestyle. I just wanted to make her happy. She is the one who found the notary. She is the one who knew where the spare key was. Arrest her. She is the mastermind. I looked at Ebony. Her face crumbled. The golden child, the princess who had never been held accountable for anything in her life, was watching her Prince Charming sell her out for a plea deal before he had even been read his rights. "You coward!" she screamed, running down the stairs and throwing her purse at him. "You liar! You told me you handled it. You told me it was legal." The deputies dragged Brad toward the door. He was still shouting, listing off crimes and blaming them on everyone but himself. I watched him go. I felt nothing. No pity, no satisfaction. Just the cold confirmation that he was exactly who I thought he was. A parasite who would eat his host and then complain about the taste. While the spectacle with Brad was unfolding, my parents had been edging toward the side exit near the kitchen. They were trying to slip away unnoticed, hoping the chaos would provide cover for their escape. They moved like shadows, hunched over, trying to make themselves invisible. It was a stark contrast to the way they had entered the party, heads high, demanding attention and adoration. They almost made it. They had their hands on the door handle when 3 men in dark suits stepped out from the hallway, blocking their path. These were not local deputies. These men did not carry tasers or handcuffs on their belts. They carried briefcases and the absolute authority of the federal government. Mr. Clarence Williams and Mrs. Bernice Williams, the lead agent, said, his voice calm and terrifyingly polite. "Please do not leave. We have so much to discuss." My father straightened up, trying to summon the bluster that had served him for decades. "Do you know who I am?" he demanded, his chest puffing out. "I am a pillar of this community. I demand to know why you are harassing my family." The agent stepped into the light. He held up a badge. "I am Special Agent Ross with the Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. And yes, Mr. Williams, we know exactly who you are. We have been reading your daughter's forensic report for the last 24 hours. It is quite a gripping read." My mother let out a strangled sound, grabbing my father's arm for support. "We pay our taxes," she stammered. "We are good citizens, Mrs. Williams. According to our records and the reconstruction provided by Tiana Williams, you have not filed a valid tax return since the Obama administration," Agent Ross said. "You have claimed losses for 3 shell companies that have no employees, no office space, and no revenue other than the funds you solicited from your church members. That is called tax evasion and wire fraud. And we are very interested in the $1.5 million in unreported income that flowed through your accounts in the last 5 years. The guests gasped. The whispers started again, louder this time. I saw Mrs. Higgins in the corner, covering her mouth with her hand. She was putting the pieces together. The investment money, the lavish parties, the cars. It was all built on lies and stolen tax dollars. My father looked at me across the room. His eyes were pleading. He looked old suddenly. The facade of the successful patriarch had dissolved, leaving behind a frightened old man who had lived above his means for too long. "Tiana, tell them," he begged. "Tell them it is a mistake. You are an accountant. You can fix this. Just look at the numbers again." I walked over to them. The crowd parted for me. I stood in front of my parents, the people who had given me life and then tried to bill me for it. "I did look at the numbers, Dad." I said, my voice steady. "I looked at them 3 times. I traced every dollar. I found the offshore accounts you tried to hide in the Cayman Islands. I found the payments to the luxury car dealerships labeled as charitable donations. I found it all. There is no mistake. The only mistake was thinking I wouldn't notice." My mother lunged at me. It was a desperate clawing motion, but Agent Ross stepped in between us, effortlessly blocking her. "You ungrateful witch," she screamed, spittle flying from her mouth. "We gave you everything. We let you live in our house. We let you be part of this family. And this is how you repay us? By snitching to the feds?" I looked at her calmly. "You stole my identity, Mom," I said. "You tried to mortgage my home to pay for your gambling debts. You forged my signature. You are not my mother right now. You are a suspect, and I am the witness." Agent Ross nodded to his team. "Take them into custody." The agents moved in. They did not use force, but they were firm. They guided my parents toward the door hands behind their backs. My father was weeping openly now, great heaving sobs that shook his shoulders. My mother was still screaming, cursing my name, calling down judgment from a god she had used as a prop for her scams. Ebony was left standing alone in the center of the ruined party. Her husband was gone. Her parents were gone. The guests were looking at her with a mixture of disgust and fascination. She looked around the room, her eyes wild and searching for an ally, for someone, anyone who would take her side. She saw me. She ran toward me, grabbing my hands before I could pull away. Her grip was tight, her fingernails digging into my skin. "Tiana, please," she cried, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "Stop this. You have to stop this. They are taking Mom and Dad. They took Brad. You can't let them do this. We are family." I looked down at her hands. She was wearing a diamond bracelet. It was fake, just like everything else in her life. Family. I repeated the word, tasting like ash in my mouth. "Yes, family," Ebony sobbed. "We are sisters. Blood is thicker than water, Tiana. You can't destroy us like this. We made a mistake, okay? We shouldn't have taken the house. But this is too far. You are sending them to prison." I pulled my hands away from her. I wiped them on my white pants as if her touch had soiled them. "You are right, Ebony," I said. "We are family." Hope flared in her eyes. "So you will help us? You will tell them to stop?" "No," I said. I stepped closer to her, invading her personal space, forcing her to look me in the eye. "Because we are family, I gave you a chance. I didn't call the police the moment I saw the lock was broken. I gave you 3 days. 3 days to call me. 3 days to apologize. 3 days to return my keys and leave." I pointed at the door where our parents had just been led out in handcuffs. "But you didn't. You posted photos of my office on Instagram. You threw a party in my living room. You let your husband call me names and laugh about stealing from me. You didn't act like family, Ebony. You acted like a thief who thought her victim was too weak to fight back." Ebony recoiled as if I had slapped her. "But prison, Tiana?" she whispered. "That is forever." I looked around the room at the opulent decorations, the expensive catering, the stolen luxury. "Prison is just a smaller room," I said. "You have been living in a prison of lies for years. At least in jail you won't have to pretend to be rich anymore." She stared at me, horror dawning on her face. "You are a monster," she hissed. Maybe I said. "But I am a monster with a deed to this house. And you are trespassing." I turned to the guests who were still watching, silent and captivated. "The party is over," I announced. "Please go home and take your gifts with you. Ebony won't be needing them where she is going." Ebony let out a scream of frustration and rage. She looked around one last time at the wreckage of her life. Then she turned and ran. She ran out the open front door into the night, chasing after the police cruisers, barefoot and broken. I watched her go. The room emptied out. The social climbers scuttled away, avoiding my gaze, terrified that I might turn my forensic gaze on their finances next. The caterers started packing up their trays silently. I was alone. I walked over to the window. The rain had stopped. The flashing blue lights were fading in the distance, heading toward the Federal Detention Center downtown. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Aunt May. "Did you see Bernice's face? Worth every penny." I smiled. It was a small, tired smile, but it was real. I turned back to the room. It was a mess, but it was my mess. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to clean it up for anyone else. I walked to the front door and closed it. I locked the deadbolt. I was safe. I was home. And the ledger was finally balanced. The last of the blue lights flashed against the living room walls like a dying heartbeat. I stood in the center of the foyer, watching the final act of the circus my family had brought to town. The guests, the so-called VIPs of Atlanta's social scene, were scrambling for the exits like rats fleeing a sinking ship. But they weren't just running, they were broadcasting. Every single one of them had their phone out. The same people who had been drinking my champagne and complimenting my mother's dress 10 minutes ago were now live streaming her downfall. I heard snippets of their commentary as they pushed past the federal agents stationed at the door. "You won't believe this, y'all. The feds just raided the party. Clarence Williams in handcuffs. They stole millions. It is a Ponzi scheme. I knew something was off about that crypto deal. Hashtag scammer season. Look at them dragging the mother out." It was a grotesque parade of voyeurism. My mother had spent her entire life curating an image of perfection, of old money and respectability. And now her legacy was going to be a viral moment on TikTok, filmed by the very people she had tried so hard to impress. I watched Agent Ross escort my parents down the front steps. They weren't walking with dignity anymore. My father Clarence was stumbling, his knees buckling under the weight of his reality. He looked small. The suit that had seemed so imposing earlier now hung off him like a costume. He was muttering to himself, shaking his head as if he could wake up from this nightmare if he just denied it hard enough. But my mother Bernice was not going quietly. She saw me standing in the doorway. I was framed by the light of the hallway, the only person in the house not moving, not running, not filming. She twisted in the grip of the agents, her face contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated hatred. "You did this!" she screamed, her voice raw and scratching against the night air. "You devil! You ungrateful, hateful child! I gave you life and you gave me prison!" I didn't flinch, I didn't step back. I looked her in the eye. "You gave me life," I said, my voice quiet but carrying in the sudden silence of the yard. "But you tried to sell it. You tried to mortgage it. You tried to spend it. The transaction is declined, Mom." "I hope you rot," she shrieked as they forced her into the back of the black SUV. "I hope you die alone in this house. You have no family. You are nothing." The door slammed shut, cutting off her curse. I watched through the tinted glass as she slumped against the seat, weeping not for me, but for herself. For the loss of her freedom, for the loss of her status, for the loss of the control she had wielded like a weapon for 3 decades. The convoy of vehicles began to move. The sirens were off now. There was no need for them. The threat was neutralized. I watched the taillights fade down Oak Street, disappearing around the corner, taking my childhood trauma with them. I was nothing, she had said. I looked down at my hands. They were steady. I took a deep breath, and for the first time in my life, my lungs filled all the way to the bottom. I wasn't nothing. I was the person who had stopped them. I was the person who had saved Mrs. Higgins's remaining savings. I was the person who had stood in the fire and refused to burn. The house was quiet now, the kind of silence that rings in your ears after a gunshot. I turned back to the living room. It was a disaster zone. There were half-eaten plates of food on my grandma's antique side tables. There were muddy footprints tracked across the Persian rug. The banner that said "Happy Birthday Ebony" was drooping from the ceiling, one side having come loose in the chaos. It hung there limp and pathetic, a tombstone for a party that should never have happened. I walked through the rooms, surveying the damage. In the kitchen, I found the remnants of the catering. Trays of expensive hors d'oeuvres that had been paid for with stolen money. I picked up a silver platter and dumped the food into the trash. It felt satisfying. In the dining room, I found a stack of papers on the sideboard. I picked them up. They were brochures for luxury cars, Bentleys, Maseratis. My father had been planning his next purchase. He had been spending money he didn't have on dreams he didn't deserve while I was working 80-hour weeks to keep my credit score perfect. I ripped the brochures in half, then in half again. I dropped the confetti into the recycling bin. I walked into the hallway and saw my reflection in the mirror Ebony had set up. I looked exhausted. My white suit was crisp, but my eyes were old. I looked like a soldier who had won the war but lost the country. A shadow moved on the front porch. I tensed instinctively, reaching for my phone. But then I saw the glowing cherry of a cigarette. It was Aunt May. She was standing just outside the door, leaning against the frame, blowing smoke into the cool night air. She was wearing her floral caftan and a pair of fuzzy slippers. She looked like a warrior queen resting after a battle. I walked out to join her. The air smelled of rain and menthols. "Well," May said, her voice raspy. "That was quite a show. Better than anything on Netflix." "Did you see them?" I asked. "I saw them," May nodded. "I saw Bernice crying. I never thought I would live to see the day. She always thought she was untouchable. She thought God was her personal accountant. She blamed me," I said. "She cursed me." May flicked ash onto the driveway. "Of course she did, baby. A snake bites you when you step on it. It don't mean you were wrong to walk through the grass. It just means it is a snake." She looked at me, her dark eyes softening. "How you feeling?" I leaned against the column of the porch. I felt the rough brick against my back. "I feel empty," I admitted. "I thought I would feel happy. I thought I would feel like celebrating. But I just feel tired." "That is grief," May said. "You are grieving the family you wanted, not the family you had. You are grieving the idea that maybe if you were good enough or rich enough or smart enough, they would finally love you. Tonight you killed that hope, and killing hope hurts even when the hope was a lie." I looked at the empty street. She was right. I wasn't crying for my parents. I was crying for the little girl who used to wait by the window for her dad to come home, hoping he would have a smile for her instead of a demand. I was crying for the teenager who signed those papers because she wanted her mother to be proud. "But they are gone now," I said. "Really gone." "Yeah, they are," May said. "And good riddance. You cut out the cancer, Tiana. It leaves a hole, sure. But now you can heal. Now you can grow something healthy in that space." She stomped out her cigarette on the pavement. "So what now?" she asked. "You gonna stay here? In this big old house full of ghosts?" I turned and looked at the house. I looked at the windows where I had seen Ebony laughing. I looked at the door Brad had broken. I looked at the garden my grandmother had loved, which was now just churned mud and broken branches. This house was my inheritance. It was my legacy. I had fought for it. I had bled for it. I had sent my own flesh and blood to prison to protect it. But as I looked at it, I didn't see a home. I saw a crime scene. I saw a monument to everything I had survived. "I can't stay here," I said. "Every room has a memory now. And none of them are mine anymore. They tainted it, Aunt May. They walked in here, and they spread their poison on the walls. If I stay here, I will always be waiting for them to come back. I will always be checking the locks. I will always hear their voices." May nodded, understanding. "Sometimes you gotta burn the field to save the farm." "I am going to sell it." I said, the decision forming instantly and clearly in my mind. The market is hot. I can get a good price. I will take the money, and I will buy something new. Something modern. Something with glass walls and high security. Something on the other side of town, where nobody knows the name Williams. "And Grandma?" May asked gently. "Grandma left me this house because she wanted me to be safe," I said. "She wanted me to have an asset. She didn't care about the bricks and mortar. She cared about me. If selling this house buys me my peace, then that is what she would want." May smiled. She touched my cheek with her rough hand. "You are a smart girl, Tiana. You always were." My stomach rumbled. A loud, unladylike sound that broke the heavy atmosphere. I realized I hadn't eaten since a protein bar at 6 a.m. "I am starving," I said. May laughed. "Me too. Watching federal raids works up an appetite." I looked at my watch. It was almost midnight. The Gilded Lily was closed. The fancy restaurants were closed. "Hey, Aunt May," I said. You want to go to Waffle House? Her eyes lit up. Do I? Hash browns, smothered and covered? Baby, you are speaking my language. I checked my pockets. I had my keys. I had my wallet. I had my freedom. My treat, I said. And this time, nobody is going to try to use a stolen credit card. We walked to my car. I helped Aunt May into the passenger seat. She settled in, adjusting her caftan. You know, Tiana, she said as I started the engine, you are an orphan now, in the eyes of the law and the eyes of the neighborhood. I put the car in gear. I looked at the house one last time. It stood dark and silent against the night sky. No, Aunt May, I said, backing out of the driveway. I am not an orphan. I have you, and I have me, and that is enough. I drove down the street, leaving the wreckage behind. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. Tomorrow I would call a real estate agent. Tomorrow I would hire a cleaning crew to scrub away the DNA of my trauma. Tomorrow I would start the process of liquidating the past. But tonight I was going to eat waffles with the only family member who had never asked me for a dime. I drove toward the highway, toward the bright yellow sign glowing in the distance, toward a future that finally belonged to no one but me. 6 months later, the air tastes different. It tastes like ozone and high-altitude oxygen. I am standing on the balcony of my new penthouse on the 35th floor of a Glass Needle in Buckhead. The view is panoramic. I can see the sprawl of Atlanta stretching out to the horizon, a grid of lights and trees that looks beautiful from this height. From down there in the muck, it is a city of hustle and grind. From up here, it is just a painting I own. I took the advice I gave myself that night on the porch. I sold the house on Oak Street. It sold in 3 days for $50,000 over asking price because the market is hungry, and the restoration work I had done was impeccable. I took that equity, combined it with my savings, and bought this place. It is modern, it is stark, it has concrete floors and floor-to-ceiling windows and a security system that requires a retinal scan. There are no azaleas to dig up. There are no spare keys hidden under mats. There is only me and the sky. I walked back inside. The interior is silent. It is the silence of a vacuum-sealed vault. My heels click on the polished concrete as I walk to the kitchen island. It is made of white marble, cold and smooth to the touch. On the counter sits a single envelope. It arrived today, forwarded by my lawyer because I changed my number and my email and scrubbed my address from the public record. But somehow they always find a way to send a bill. The return address is handwritten in shaky cursive. I recognize the penmanship. It is my mother's. The stamp is crooked. The envelope is cheap, the kind you buy at the dollar store in a pack of 50. I pick it up. It feels light, lighter than the guilt I used to carry. I haven't seen my parents in 180 days, but I know where they are. I know exactly where they are because I read the case files. The IRS does not play games. They stripped my parents of everything. The luxury condo they were renting, evicted. The leased cars, repossessed. The fake jewelry and the designer clothes, seized and auctioned off to pay a fraction of the back taxes they owed. They are living in a one-bedroom apartment in a subsidized housing complex on the south side. It is the kind of neighborhood my mother used to drive through with the doors locked, making comments about how people just needed to work harder. Now she lives there, and they are working harder. My father Clarence, the man who styled himself a CEO and a community pillar, is currently employed as a night shift janitor at the Peachtree Center Mall. He pushes a broom. He empties trash cans. He cleans up after the people he used to pretend to be. I heard from a mutual acquaintance that he wears a hat pulled low over his eyes, terrified that someone might recognize him. My mother Bernice is working at a cafeteria in a middle school. She serves lunch. She wears a hairnet and orthopedic shoes. She spends her days on her feet serving tater tots to children who don't care about her social standing. It is a steep fall from the gilded lily. And Brad? My brother-in-law, the real estate mogul? He took a plea deal, but it didn't save him. The federal judge was not impressed by his tears or his attempts to blame his wife. The sheer volume of elderly victims, the calculated nature of the fraud, it all weighed against him. He was sentenced to 10 years in federal prison. He is currently serving time in a medium security facility in Florida. I heard he is working in the laundry. I hope he knows how to get stains out. Ebony fared the best, if you can call it that. She avoided prison because she was too incompetent to be a true co-conspirator. But the IRS took every dime she had. She lost the car, she lost the clothes, she lost the followers. She is working at a nail salon and strip mall in Decatur. She does pedicures. She spends her days scrubbing calluses off other women's feet. Sometimes I wonder if she thinks about my shoes, the ones she tried to steal while she is buffing someone else's toes. I look at the letter in my hand. I know what it says before I open it. I know the script. I slide my finger under the flap and tear it open. I unfold the single sheet of lined notebook paper. Tiana, we are suffering. Your father's back is bad. The heat in this apartment doesn't work right. We are family. God says to honor your parents. We forgive you for what you did. We just need a little help. Just $5,000 to get us back on our feet. We promise we will pay you back. Please, honey. Don't let us live like this. Love, Mom. We forgive you. I stare at those 3 words. They forgive me. They forgive me for stopping them from robbing me. They forgive me for exposing their crimes. The delusion is terminal. Even at rock bottom, even scrubbing toilets and serving lunch meat, they still believe they are the victims. They still believe I owe them. They are asking for $5,000. The exact amount of the dinner bill. The exact amount they tried to steal from me that night. The symmetry is almost poetic. I don't feel anger. I don't feel sadness. I feel nothing. It is a beautiful, clean nothingness. It is the feeling of a balance sheet that is finally zeroed out. I walk over to the shredder that sits by my desk. It is a heavy-duty cross-cut shredder, the kind used in government offices. I turn it on. It hums with a lethal efficiency. I don't crumble the letter. I don't burn it in a dramatic fire. That would be giving it too much emotion. That would be giving it power. I feed the paper into the slot. The machine whirs. The teeth grab the paper and pull it down. My mother's handwriting, her pleas, her manipulation, her audacity, it all disappears into the metal maw. It is chewed up and spat out into the bin below, turning into meaningless confetti. I turn off the shredder. The silence returns. I walk back to the kitchen. I open the wine fridge. I pull out a bottle of Sauvignon Blanc. It isn't an $800 bottle. It is $20. But I bought it with my own money. I earned it. I pour a glass. The liquid is pale gold in the light. I walk out onto the balcony. The wind is brisk up here, whipping my silk robe around my legs. I walk to the railing and look out at the city. Atlanta glitters below me. Somewhere down there in the dark pockets of the grid, my parents are sitting in a cold apartment waiting for a check that will never come. Somewhere down there, Ebony is soaking her tired feet. Somewhere far away, Brad is staring at a concrete ceiling. They are in the prison of their own choices. And I am here. I take a sip of the wine. It is crisp and cold and tastes like victory. I think about Aunt May. She is coming over for dinner on Sunday. I hired a private car to pick her up. We are going to eat steaks and watch movies on my 100-inch screen. She is the only family I have left, and she is the only family I need. I lean against the railing and close my eyes, listening to the hum of the city. I am 29 years old. I have a penthouse. I have a career. I have my dignity. And most importantly, I have the receipt. I open my eyes and toast the skyline. To the audit, I whisper. I drink the wine. I turn my back on the city and walk back inside my glass castle. I close the sliding door, shutting out the noise, shutting out the past. I am free. Tiana's journey reveals a brutal but liberating truth. Shared DNA is not a license for abuse. For years, she equated love with financial submission, believing her worth lay in fixing her family's mistakes. But when she finally closed her wallet, she opened the door to her own freedom. The greatest lesson here is that boundaries aren't punishments, they are protections. You cannot buy respect from people committed to exploiting you. Sometimes, the most heroic thing you can do is stop saving everyone else and finally save yourself. Your peace is simply too expensive to be on sale. If you have ever had to cut off toxic family members to survive, hit that subscribe button and tell us your story in the comments below.